Welcome into the Fan Midday Show. I'm Will Haskett. I am back. Jimmy Cook is over there. Eddie Garrison is over there. I'm using my fingers to point. If you're on YouTube, you can see that. If you're driving around, you can't see that. But trust me, they're all there. And we're all here, and we're basking in the glow of life beyond what was the last 2 months, 3 months of anticipation, of speculation. We now know the players. We now proceed forward as NFL fans in this market, and we now wonder what will happen with this Colts franchise moving forward. On this beautiful Tuesday, we welcome you here on a busy sports day as well from the DriveHubler.com studios. Jimmy, my first time back since, the day before the draft last week, and we sort of had our hopes, our dreams. I think you and I were texting. Eddie, you were a part of that text on draft night as well. I still don't really know what happened. I blacked out there for a second. But if you now listen to Jim Irsay, and thank God for Jim Irsay, because if it weren't for him talking, would we ever have any idea what's actually happening or the thought process that's happening?
We still don't, but we think we do, which is nice.
Yeah, which is good.
I like that comfort.
So I appreciate a little bit of the transparency that comes from that, which, by the way, we'll talk about with Bob Kravitz coming up 2 o'clock, Mike Chappell at 1 o'clock, ESPN Radio and the SEC Network's Peter Burns at 12:30 here today. A lot of smokescreen. I still don't know if I fully believe that there was this unbelievable work done behind the scenes of a smokescreen ploy by the Colts to misdirect information in other places in the hopes that if they didn't move up from 4, the guy that they said they would have taken at number 1 was still going to be there at number 4 for them. But we now exist, I think, in this ether afterwards of huge optimism because we found a draft, we saw a draft that just took place that I think was a philosophical sort of shift in how the Colts go about their business, especially for top picks in the draft that could not and maybe won't work out, but at least we're trying for the home run. We're trying for the walk-off home run instead of trying to maybe put together a couple of singles and move the runners over. And that, to me, is how I want to start the conversation today, Jimmy, because I wasn't floored, but I was excited, and I love drafts. I think that drafts are the coolest part of sports. You know, I work in golf predominantly, and there's nothing in that in golf. We don't get to really hype young talent because they have to prove it to sort of get to the next level. Drafts give us this unbelievable chance to just overhype something that may never actually materialize. But sometimes it's okay to build a fantasy that may come true in a couple of years' time.
I was hyped as can be. And it was a legitimate scream of joy, when it happened.
You can scream and jump up and down and be healthy about that. I would pull something.
Yeah,
so
mainly because, and again, this is not coming from somebody that's a diehard Colts fan. We've addressed this on the show where my rooting loyalties lie, but I enjoy covering this team and I love my city to the point that I wanted something new, I wanted something fresh, I wanted a home run to be taken, and I was pretty much reserved to the fact that the selection was ultimately going to be Will Levis. I believed that stuff did leak. I believed that the Colts were trying to backtrack and push back the week or two prior, saying that, I don't know where everybody's saying it's down to one guy. Wasn't us. We didn't say it. And I might have been willing to give it the benefit of the doubt there, but then we were following the betting lines all week, and there was a massive shift to the point of 20 minutes to go before the draft starts. It's minus
someone conned Vegas too.
It's minus 650 for Will Levis to go number 4
That's pretty
to the
good.
Colts.
That's pretty good work if you can con Vegas.
And you're happy that's some Ocean's 11 madness right there. Without the need to break into the Bellagio, you're fine. You just do it from home apparently. So for me, I was in that mindset. I think maybe a lot of Colts fans were when we left the airways. I was like, it's going to be Will Levis. I think a majority of our picks that went out on Twitter were it's going to be Will Levis's selection, and they do the opposite. They take Anthony Richardson, and to your point, they finally take a home run swing. They finally have a high upside quarterback and have hope for the first time in 4 years. And I stressed this in a blog I did on 1075thefan.com. I understand hope doesn't win football games.
No.
I get that. I do. But it's also
this could
May
implode.
2nd.
This could
Correct.
This could not work in dramatically bad fashion.
Correct. But it's May 2nd right now.
Yeah.
in the moment, regardless of which way it goes, that's enough for me. We've been begging for a swing to be taken. They finally take one. Now's the hard part of waiting 5 months, maybe 5 months plus, to see what your presumed riches turn into whenever he goes under center.
I'm not a quarterback whisperer. I've never coached a down or a day of football in my entire life. I don't pretend to know the mechanics. I don't sit here with a microphone in my face and then say that with some uncertain terms, that I know what Anthony Richardson projects to be when it is all said and done. So that's why we put our trust in those who have been making these decisions for a long time, those who have worked in this industry, the Shane Steichens of the world, who have enough of a track record on their resume. And it appears, as more and more things have come out and more great articles have been written, that he had a significant influence on this pick, which was the conversation we had just under a week ago, is where is the consensus and where is the strongest of the opinions coming from to drive whatever that final decision is. And while it seemed it actually was maybe even deeper down in the scouting department than it necessarily was the head coach, I think the new head coach certainly had a lot of insight and input into making that happen, which now then transitions us into this move forward. I still, again, with this whole preface that I am not somebody that understands the mechanics of the quarterback position enough to sit here and tell you one thing or the other. All I can do is point to, give me the list of guys in their college completion percentage who have been drafted high in the NFL and what they've ended up becoming. It's not a great list. Like where his completion percentage is as a college quarterback compared to other quarterbacks that have gone in the first round. It's the Ryan Leafs of the world. I'm trying to think of the other. Jake Locker, I think, was on that list, like sub 60% completion guys who have gone in the first round of the NFL draft. Those are certainly things that are a problem. But there's a great article on ESPN.com by our guy Stephen Holder, and it's one of the best things I've read just in terms of the timeline of it all and what guys are looking at. I encourage anybody to go read it. It's not behind a paywall. You can do it at your leisure. Secrets, Doubts, and Decisions Inside the Colts' Pursuit of Anthony Richardson. And it talks about their infatuation with his ability going back 2 years ago, not even this past season, but how scouts initially saw him. And one of the, I thought, most telling quotes in it all came from what Chris Ballard said, and this isn't new just to the article, but we've heard it before, is that there were flaws in all four of the top quarterback prospects in this draft. So if you are going to take a quarterback, you take the guy that you think gives you the biggest upside. And there's no debate, in my opinion, about that one. And even though we sat here last week and hoped that C.J. Stroud might actually fall, that crazy scenario of two defensive players going off the board at 2 and 3 would happen, I still, even given all of this information and all of the stuff, that would have been, to me, the doomsday sort of scenario for the Colts if they truly loved this guy and they had to make that choice between C.J. Stroud and Anthony Richardson at 4. It would have been really interesting to see the reaction of this town, of the two of us sitting in this room, if they had gone in that direction. The perfect storm ended up happening for them. They didn't have to worry about the two more polished passers coming off the board in front of them, and then they took the guy with the biggest upside. And it's great for me. I contend that this has never been a regime, a current brain trust for the Colts that have ever been fully enamored with traits. I think once you get past the 3rd or 4th round, yes, then you can draft guys based off of speed potential or how they sort of tested, but everything else has been character, talking to coaches, do they play hard, chemistry fit, scheme fit, a few of these things we've put in. An Alec Pierce draft pick. He wasn't a wowing scouts guy. He's just a guy that made a lot of good catches. He could be a great receiver for this team, maybe, but you didn't go and take the receiver at that slot last year that was the wow combine guy. This year, they took a bunch of guys early, including who you hope to be the franchise pick of this draft, because they were wow trait guy, not wow on film necessarily yet guy. Which is why I also thought, and I think I said on the air, we can go find the clip. Eddie, go and find it. I said our dream scenario was if C.J. Stroud fell to them at 2 or at 4, and then what happens in the second round? They get Brents the corner. I was in love with Brents the corner. Yep. He not only fell to them based off of some mock drafts, but allowed them to trade back not once but twice and accumulate resources and still get the guy that I thought was the most intriguing cornerback prospect in this draft. So again, they put a way more chips in the this guy could become something, not this guy is something right now that we know what we're getting. And I'm okay with that at this general juncture of the Colts. But I've been hearing a lot of people, including KB in the morning, say, well, they've drafted on traits before. This isn't like a huge swing. I think it was a huge swing for this team in the first couple of rounds to finally look at guys that are traits first, not tape first.
I think the overall, if you're giving a grade, to the cumulative
Please
picks
don't.
that are made.
Yeah, please
and again, I don't mean a letter grade in that sense. I mean, like, if you're grading like the physical traits, the athleticism that's present on tape, if you're looking at that collection of their first 4 picks, it's probably the most aggressive they've been in that regard. But the weight of it is carried, in my mind, by the selection of Anthony Richardson. To KB's point, this is a Ballard thing in terms of he loves just high motor, high athletic guys. And like that part isn't new. But over the course of like the way they went out swinging in any of the just athletic scores, and again, it's just one metric of how to measure a player, it's off the charts for this draft class. So in that regard, I agree with you, but I also understand where KB's coming from, that type of philosophy or that trait isn't new to Ballard, but the way that they attacked it so consistently in this draft is, in my mind.
I would classify them as risk-averse in many of the moves that they've made, draft or free agency otherwise, in the past. And I'm not saying that as a negative. I'm not. I'm a risk-averse person. I would rather, if I was in that position and my job depended on the product and getting players in to perform, I would try to achieve as much as I can with the highest floor guys, sprinkling in some potential pops. That would just be, that's probably how I would invest my money too. Like, I'm not penny stocking my way into a retirement account. I'm mixing in some stocks, bonds, everything like that. I'm risk averse in many of that. I'd be risk averse as a GM. But I thought that this was a far riskier draft class, and I think you had to do it. I will defend Chris Ballard on a number of fronts, and actually, I don't really talk about the Colts or much on social media, but I went back and forth with a few people this past week, as I thought that it was a really sharp draft from a GM that looked for not only traits, but for fits, and I thought that he approached the draft the exact way that I would want any GM of my football team to approach it. He looked at needs, he took appropriate risk, and made some different gambles, and people are, well, but he hasn't shown up on the field. It's like, I don't really know how much we put the front office to blame for the fact that you assembled what was a really good offensive line that you had to then invest in. We can talk, the left tackle thing's a different situation.
Sure.
But the offensive line taking 16 steps backwards last year doesn't fall on those who put together the bodies in the first place, like, in my opinion. So when I looked at this draft and I was watching all the picks come out over the past weekend, I was like, okay, yeah, we're sort of going there. But because there had been the dip in on-field performance, because assembling all of these quote-unquote kind of safe pieces around each other then led to a year when you didn't have the quarterback position right again, and everything kind of just came to a head. It all went wrong. It wasn't just the quarterback went wrong. It all went wrong. The trenches went wrong. A couple of skill position things here didn't go right. Everything went wrong. And so if you're going to get a new lease on life and shift, I thought the shift was really good this year. It could not work. It could end up not working, some of the picks that were made. The first 2 picks could both flame out of the NFL. They could also be perennial Pro Bowlers for the next 10, 15 years, especially when you have a quarterback who's only 20 years old to do it. And I thought it was good. I thought it was a philosophical shift by Ballard. And I'm here for it because I supported the way that he ran this football team to get it to the stability and the depth that it had over the previous regime. But then when all of a sudden the pieces just didn't quite fit, and you realize without huge ceiling guys in here last year, when it gets bad, it can get bad pretty fast. Now it's time to sort of adapt and adjust. And I don't know. I'm patient. I'm more patient than a lot of people. And I thought that this past weekend was like, okay, I like this. I really like that there's a tiny little philosophical shift that you can see just in these 12 draft picks, really more so the very top of the draft.
For me, and you agree with this, and it's the obvious point, but it needs to be said, when you evaluate this draft class and when you evaluate what ultimately happens in 3 seasons, just for the sake of argument, with Ballard, with Steichen, and with Anthony Richardson, it's all going to be determined by what the latter does.
No doubt.
I don't believe in draft grades, but we did a piece yesterday regarding where draft grades are at right now. And draft grades, you need to understand, the listening audience, are not just another exercise like a mock draft, but they're done based on what's available to you, which is the needs that were there for the team, the players they made. Did they reach for them? Did they trade up for them? How did they acquire them? And who did they pass on? You see all the time redrafting the 2019 class. It happens all the time once the products actually get their reps in on the field. And how do they perform? So just because the Colts have an A+ to an A to an A- in some spots doesn't mean anything until the snaps are played. But the entire basis of the grade, and that's where you find in all of these summaries, is on, shocker, the most important position in football. So Ballard having this philosophical shift or this shift on where he wants to address traits in players and just the overall attacking of certain needs on the team is fine, and I'm happy for that. But this is his swing. This is Steichen's swing. And if Richardson doesn't pan out, and we haven't even gotten to the fact that you have both Stroud and Levis in division now.
Yeah.
It is. It's going to be interconnected to a degree we haven't seen in a long time in terms of the way ramifications for three front offices are judged over the coming 3 years.
Yeah, and I'm fine with that. Because, again, I think you've allowed this particular iteration of Colts management to adapt and learn, which I think in any functional organization, and this is the problem with professional sports, especially the NFL, where it is an insulated, closed grouping of 32 franchises, is that all 32 can't have successful seasons, right? In business, if you had 32 different franchises of the same business, of novelty flag maker,
they're not
flags
doing well.
Are still here. Yeah, they're still here. Novelty flag maker businesses, the bottom half that create a bad product that doesn't hold together, cost point, ROI, whatever it might be, will eventually just cease to exist. They will not be able to exist in that marketplace. The NFL doesn't. It's an incubator. It continues to churn out money and support all of the organizations, whether they're run poorly, whether they're run great or not. And there's just not enough wins to go around to support things. And a lot of times, good people lose their jobs because they're just looking for something new and different, because you could be mediocre for 8 years, but that's okay in some businesses. You know, the top salesperson, but you're keeping the doors open, you're keeping the payroll rolling. And this is just an interesting situation for me because I think in almost all situations, managers, coaches, GMs, whatever, probably get too short of a leash in whatever capacity that they're in, unless there's just egregious mistakes. And there's been plenty of them in this market and other markets. But for the most part, we have too itchy of a trigger to jettison guys out of their positions. I think that it's nice to just sort of see and watch this thing learn. But you're right. This is the end. This is the last experiment if it goes wrong for this particular leadership structure for the Colts, as it is all made. Other just funny little draft stuff is we're going to dive into some of the players a little bit. We're going to get into the three SEC guys, predominantly Richardson coming up at the bottom of the hour with Peter Burns from the SEC Network, who's covered a lot of Richardson and even some of the other guys that were taken later in this. So many fun guys in this draft. I was laughing this morning thinking about it. I was listening to Jake and KB talking about Titus Leo. Do you think he gets drafted if his name isn't Titus Leo? Like if his name is like Jake Thomas, do you think he gets drafted? Because think about the late draft linebacker athletes that we've gotten. We've had EJ Speed, Zaire Franklin. I mean, Darius Leonard ended up becoming Shaq Leonard because it just sounds cooler. And that was a second round pick. So it wasn't the late round pick guys. It's like, I feel like we have this amazing magnetic energy to, these potential diamonds in the rough, but you gotta have like a cool football name. Like Titus Leo is gonna make the roster because of his name. I mean, I know he has to play, but I'm as confident in that as anything else.
Counterpoint, disappointed to see this. Didn't look it up until just now, but I mentioned it when we were together on Wednesday. Bumper Poole out of Arkansas does not get drafted. He ends up being an undrafted free agent signing by Carolina. So by that same logic, I feel like Bumper Poole is just an epic name. Would have loved to have had that be called at some point in time in Kansas City. Doesn't happen. But gets signed as an undrafted free agent.
I also was getting really happy for Matt Taylor because last year, I mean, God bless him, on defense, I mean, there were so many names. I mean, Okereke, he's covering for Odeyingbo. See, I can't even do it. Odeyingbo. You had two Odengbos.
Yeah, you had Odeyingbo and Adeniabo.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You had two of them. You had Okereke, and we were going along nicely in this draft. Brents, Downs, you're adding a couple of offensive things, and then we get Adetomiwa Adebore. Did I get that right? Adebore? No. Adebawore.
I'm just going off of Lara Overton's pronunciation, which was Adetomiwa Adebawore.
That's incorrect.
All right, then.
It's Adetomiwa.
Okay.
It's
Adetomiwa.
Sorry to throw Lara under the bus there. That's my fault.
Adebawore.
I apologize, Lara.
So it's not Adebawore.
Yeah, if you look at the pronunciation on the player profile they sent out, it's Adetomiwa.
I mean, Matt was approaching a really good defensive unit to be able to call, and then in the fourth round with the second overall Colts pick, and by all accounts, it's a steal too. Loved his measurables.
Fell in the draft.
Yep. Ran a faster 40 than Juju Brents did, I think.
Baffling his 40 time.
And Josh Downs.
Yep.
Which is kind of amazing. So, yeah. But so sorry, Matt, out there. It's just going to have to. I mean, that's so hard from a play-by-play standpoint. I mean, once you've done it 100 times, and you know this, Jimmy, it's like, once you've done it 1,000 times, it's fine. But here I am, like, I don't talk about the NBA on a regular basis. And so if you just ask me to pronounce Giannis's last name, I have to think about it for a second and get it right. So I'm just not going to pronounce Giannis's last name. Now, if you came to me for a PGA Tour broadcast and you want me to say Jazz Janawanatanan, then, we can have that all day long. Actually,
that's the Kumpo. There we go.
Yeah.
A match here. There you go.
So anyway, I just thought about that for Matt Taylor.
He's a pro's pro.
That's
not the joke I let off with him yesterday. I instead asked him, can I interest you in some 2024 mocks, Matt? To which he groaned audibly and said, no, please. No. I need sleep. I need rest. I've done enough draft prep work for one season.
Over, under, what's the number we're setting on these, of the 12 that were drafted to make it out of camp? Now, that could also be practice squad. So certainly some of these guys could get jetted, and I think there's 2 or 3 candidates here that are probably 2 candidates for the practice squad off of this, but there's some serious roster crunch math to do here. The Will Mallory pick in the 5th round is really interesting as a speed tight end guy because you already have a bunch of intriguing athletic pass catching tight end prospects. You don't really have intriguing blocking tight end prospects, so there's likely to be some attrition, you would think, at the tight end position. But with so many draft picks this year to try and fill holes, and they did a great job. I mean, you get 3 corners out of this draft. You do a good job, I think, with not only a really nice rotational offensive line piece and what Blake Freeland can be in terms of his measurables, but you've got a practice wad candidate in Jake Witt, the final one, to see if you can really build off of those traits in a year or two's time. But man, 12's a lot of picks, and we've seen guys not be able to make the roster in a traditional 8 or 9 draft pick class in the last couple of years for this roster. I mean, is it a crazy number to say like 9.5 is your over-under on guys to make it all the way through camp and stick on this roster? That's probably a little bit too harsh. But the math is hard. I mean, it's hard. You're going to have to bump guys off of the current roster to make room for this massive of a draft haul. I was surprised.
I was going to go just because, and again, I'm not basing this off anything, just of how hard it is to make it onto a roster after being a rookie draft pick, particularly if you're a 5 through 7, even though the numbers are going up for extending that to 4 through 7 players that are able to make an impact over the course of not just their NFL careers, but right away. I was going to say like 8 or 7. So I don't think that 9.5 is too harsh. Eddie, what do you think in terms of an over-under?
Yeah, what are we setting this at? If we had to set the market right now, what's the over-under number on guys
to make the team from the draft class?
Now, are we saying 53-man roster make the team? Because I think if they're on the practice squad, they've still sort of made the team, right? So that's a tough one for me. 53-man roster, that number goes way down because a bunch of these guys, 2 of these guys at least, are going to the practice squad if you can get them through.
I would say for the exercise, 53.
Okay, 53. Yeah, then I think you're right. I might have dropped it down to 8.5.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree there. I mean, you look at a lot of the needs that were addressed over the course of the weekend is why the grades were what they were for them filling all those needs. I guess the biggest wild card in all of this, and it probably is a practice squad journey for him right away, but how does Jake Witt affect that number? Because Brugler had a very high grade on him, even though he was a 7th round selection. And it's clearly somebody that is a developmental project, but where does his path end up? For the initial 53-man roster when training camp's over and they're ready to go for week 1, no, I don't think he's a part of that. But there's pieces to this draft where it's like, okay, they're flyer guys, but if they translate, maybe by next season's time, they're a part of the official 53-man.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to mull on that number for a little bit. I got another over-under number. Actually, I've got a comp number between that number and a different one. I'm going to run that potential bet by you. We're going to move Peter Burns to 130. I'm just telling Eddie this right now on the air. This is me live producing for us right now on the air. We're going to move Peter Burns to 1230, which means coming back after this break, I'm going to run another scenario by you, which I think would be an even more enticing hypothetical of numbers of Colts making the roster from this draft class and something to do with the 4th overall pick. That's Jimmy. I'm Will. This is the Midday Show on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
The Fan.
We'll ask you, Jimmy Cook, with you here on the Midday Show. We're guest heavy coming up next hour and beyond. We're still talking about this Colts draft class, all 12 of them. We were having some fun before the break about how many of these guys see the 53-man roster. We decided in the break it's the 53-man roster. It's a 12-man draft class. And if you had to set the over-under on guys there, I said 9. I say 10.5 or 9? I said 9.5.
Yes.
I said 9.5. So if you took the over, then you're thinking
I thought you said 8.5.
Well, I shifted to 8.5 if we were saying practice squad counted as making the roster. But then we decided that it was not practice squad inclusive, that it was 53-man roster, how many of these guys make it. And a lot of it has to do with special teamers. I mean, you think that Daniel Scott is here predominantly for special teams, and if you need some depth at safety, which you don't have a ton of depth for, but he's almost my age entering the NFL. I joke. He's 20. He'll turn 25. I think he's your age, guy, right? You guys 25 yet? You guys still?
My age.
I'm 28.
Yeah,
I'm 24.
You ready to play? You ready to suit up and play
Yeah, let's
safety
go.
and special teams?
Yeah, let's go.
This coming year, him. If Titus Leo grows into something as a speed rusher out of the 6th round, but you could probably get him flying down the field and get creative with some contracts of the guys that are kind of on your roster right now as those 6th linebacker, special teamers, extra safety. So I think there's some potential in that, but you just really don't know how a lot that's going to pan out. You've got 2 cornerbacks you expect to sort of be on the field from the very beginning in Brenson. I like the Darius Rush pickup in the 5th round. You take a flyer on Texas A&M's Jalen Jones in the 7th round. Does he stick as a gunner who, it's just kind of weird. So I'll stick with 9.5. So that means if you go under, you think that at least 3 guys are getting moved to the practice squad or outright cut out of camp. If you go over, then you're bullish on, at the very least, 10 out of the 12 making the 53-man roster. So I think that's pretty fair. So I'm going to then pose the second one to you, and you guys can think about it for a second if you really want that over-under. Which one do you go on that one? Which is higher, the number of draft picks to make the 53-man roster or Anthony Richardson starts this coming season?
It's a great question.
Starts.
I think it's an easy answer.
Yeah, I'll go
But I
starts.
also think it's an interesting conversation. I know he needs reps. I know that with so many limited reps at Florida that he needs to be out there playing. The coaching staff, everybody, the GM, you heard from even Jim Irsay in the sound at the beginning of this show, that he's going to learn by playing. I think this is an environment, and because this roster and because we've completely changed our tune from 365 days ago to saying, hey, we're one good quarterback away from being a contender in the AFC, and now it's more like, you know what, we're trying to build something for 2 or 3 years down the road, that it's more likely that you will see him on the field in week 1 than Gardner Minshew, which I think as soon as he was drafted, almost all of us are saying, hey, it's Minshew starter in week 1. I don't want to throw this out there hypothetically because of the injury, so let's just view it more solely as, do you think you get that many starts in a 17 game season?
The more I've thought about it, and because initially I'm more of the let a guy sit for half a season or a year, let him learn.
The schedule will have a lot to do with that when we see how we know who they're going to play, but we don't know when. So if weren't we on the road for like 3 of the first 4 last year? Like, I feel like the Colts were gone, and then they came home for a little bit, if I remember correctly on the schedule. Do you want that? I don't know.
If it's mechanics, if it is genuinely mechanics, like Steichen, like Ballard both said, if that's what it is, it's fixable. You know you can correct it. You believe you can correct it. But he understands everything else. He processes things well. He understands exotic concepts from an offensive schematic standpoint.
Yeah.
He's able to read defenses. If it is mechanics, sitting does nothing for you. Sitting is this is what the day-to-day process of an NFL quarterback is like. Gardner Minshew's been through that. He can help guide you through that. You're trusting your quarterback room to do that. If that's what you're concerned about, okay, you sit him until you believe he's established good off-the-field habits in terms of how he's preparing as a quarterback. If you don't think those are issues and it's mechanics-based and you believe in this offensive line, sitting does nothing. It's go out there, learn, put things on tape, and see where you're at. And even if it is, which I know you wouldn't do this because the preseason has devolved. This is a whole different conversation. But the preseason has devolved into a point that how much do you really get out of it other than, okay, is everybody on task? Is our first unit up to speed? But you're never really going to put a guy that's not going to be with your first unit in those reps. Not that Minshew needs it, but you're just not going to do it because you want some type of, whether it's chemistry, whether it's understanding, whether it's timing, you want something down in those dress rehearsal games during the preseason. So you wouldn't waste that for Richardson, but if you think that's all it is, give him a preseason game and show on tape, and if you feel like there's improvements there, sitting him does nothing. Start him week 1, and I would go the over in that regard for your question.
Yeah, I would take that. You would take that number versus number of guys to make the roster. So there are more games started by Anthony Richardson than members of his draft class to make the 53-man roster. I think that's probably the fair bet. It'd probably be like minus 180 or something if that was the number you were picking. It's interesting to me because as the fan base who's all driving around listening or watching right now can attest, you want to see your guy. You want to see the guy out there on the field. I don't know of very many situations that we can really think of where anybody has been drafted and you're like, yes, sit him. We're not ready for that guy. When that has happened, it has been in situations where the established quarterback that you have has already shown you success. I think there's a very real possibility this team goes to camp and Gardner Minshew is the better quarterback for a while this season. Is he the better athlete? No. Is he the better potential quarterback? No. But is he the better quarterback to lead an NFL football team in September? I think there's a very real possibility that happens until the mechanics match the speed of the game. Now, again, if you read all of the stuff, you listen to all the interviews from the brass, from the people behind. I mean, my Twitter timeline's been filled with great clips of pocket awareness and pocket presence and eye scans of Richardson. So even though some of the throws were off, he knew where he was supposed to go with the football. He was able to elude pressure and not rely solely on running first and do all these things. So if the instinct is there, and if you believe and you listen to the Colts brass and say they went down to Gainesville and they put him through a litany of tests from throwing plays up on the board, junking defenses at him, and having him react to it, and they were so blown away by his maturity and his ability to interact and react, then maybe that learning curve is quicker than you said. But it's a very interesting business to be in, even with a new coach with a 6-year contract, even with a general manager who's been given a new lease on life with a new coach and the blessing of his owner. It just is really, really hard to show up, and on week 1 you're going to start, and look, I'm using this with air quotes, people on YouTube say the inferior quarterback. Not long-term, maybe not even middle of the season, but to roll out week 1 without the guy that's going to deliver the ball most effectively in this offense for Shane Steichen. It's going to be fast. And again, Shane Steichen has the relationship also with Gardner Minshew. So there's 2 quarterbacks here that Shane Steichen has had a lot of influence in his very short period of time being the head coach of this football team. I could make a case both ways, that it's week 4, week 5. It's a couple of weeks, and it's like, oh, wow, let's not scar tissue the 20-21-year-old too quickly here if, it's a 50%, 45% completion percentage to begin things, and we're going to try and figure it out on the field. I don't think this is Peyton Manning's rookie season where you just let him go out there and just throw pick after pick after pick, knowing that he's going to figure it out. And you go, I think it has to be a little bit of a mix of both.
I don't disagree with that, but I'm also banking with my observation on the offensive line returning close to what they were 2 years ago. And if that is the case, we always worry about not just the bad habits forming, but having happy feet in the pocket, bailing on clean pockets when you shouldn't have, not trusting what you're feeling from a pressure perspective and bailing too early to the point that, okay, now you're having rushers from either side chasing you down, and now you have to make a decision to either tuck it and run or, either throw off platform or throw on the run and hope that you're able to complete said pass. That isn't as big of a fear with the Colts in theory because of what they've invested and what they have in the trenches. I say in theory because if it's what you got last year, then no, you are at risk of those bad habits forming early in this process. Because of the reps, and again, they don't bother me that he doesn't have them, but I go back to my original point. If the observation is like anything in life, whether it's football, whether it's golf, whether it's broadcasting, repetition wins out. You're in theory, if you have the ability to learn and improve and grow from your mistakes, the more you do something, the better you're going to get at it. Assuming you're able to grow, and if you don't, you weren't good at it to begin with, and hey, it's not for you. So I don't see the massive difference waiting 1 game versus 6 games.
Yep.
If your plan is to play him this year and you think that he can be well protected, throw him to the fire week 1.
Again, I don't think there's a wrong answer here. To be honest,
yeah, I'm not going to be uproarious about it.
This goes kind of back to what I said. It was like I thought it was fascinating and fun to watch the organization shift a little bit philosophically from let's put together all these pieces, let's build depth, let's build all of this stuff, let's have our security blanket of positions and guys that we can always trust, and to take a couple of swings on some really, really high ceiling guys early in the draft is exciting. It's a new look. We'll see how it sort of works out, but I do think that there's always going to be a little bit of instinct to want to return to that safety and that comfort. And this isn't an owner, this isn't a market, I think, that would really tolerate the idea of losing just for the sake of development, that you're going to want to see progress through victory also on the field. In, let's be honest, folks, a still super competitive division. I understand that Jacksonville is finally building something to be competent. They are the team to sort of look after, but you've got potentially 2 other fellow rookie quarterbacks starting against you, depending on what happens in Nashville.
And that's the other thing that'll drive annoyance in the fan base, because Levis, I don't think goes right away. I'm sure it's still Tannehill's job to lose, but he could.
Is Tannehill even there week 1?
That's a good point. Maybe it's a moot point and they move away from him and it doesn't matter, in which case, yeah, then it is Levis right away. Stroud, I would think,
gets the reins.
I would like to say I think, but I've said it for the last couple of weeks, and I've said it for years. I don't trust anything the Texans do. So
that's true.
They could easily trot Davis Mills out there. Wouldn't surprise me one bit.
No, that would be idiotic.
But that's what I'm saying. If the other, and it doesn't matter to the organization, right? The organization doesn't think like the fans do. If you think like them, you end up with them. I get all that. I get the age-old adage. So they're not reacting to this. But just from a pulse of the city, if you see all the shiny new toys out there in your own division,
I get it.
Where's our toy? What's happening? Why are we letting him go ball out?
I still think this is an organization that tries to put the best product on the field to win football games.
Sure.
Week in and week out.
And if he's the better one,
unless you're undefeated and you have the number 1 seed locked up in the playoffs, it's the only time we ever try to actually lose games.
If he's clearly the better product in camp, Richardson's going to get the job. Like I trust the organization at that point. If it is clear from an observational standpoint that he is,
if he's the best, then you have to.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a whole different conversation than where we're at right now, which again is the tough part about trying to map this out 2 months from now. I still think I agree with you. There's no wrong answer, and I'm not really going to be mad either way, because I have flipped on this. It's like, all right, well, if it's reps and it's just mechanics, let him go out there and prove it week 1. I don't think there is a definitive correct answer here, but if it is, in my mind, just mechanics, that's what I would do at this point. I would throw him out there.
Again, at this early of a stage, we don't know what the right answer is. We're going to get reports. We're going to watch him in camp. We're going to kind of feel out what that looks like. It'll be really interesting, because I don't think at the very, very beginning of the season that it's going to be as clear cut. If it is clear cut in Richardson's favor, then let's go. All systems go. And it could be a really exciting not only season, but next few years for this team. All right, you are able to 3D print yourself the ideal football player of any position. What is this roster still lacking for you?
Okay.
You want to think about that? Do you want me to break?
I assume that's what was happening, but if it's not, I can...
All right, I'll let the brain work for a little bit. Eddie's always on his toes over there. He's ready to go. All right, we'll get the answer to that. And also, there could be some fun tonight in the NBA. We'll dip our toe in the NBA water as well. Midday Show continues here on The Fan. Fan Midday Show with Jimmy Cook. I'm Will Haskett. Closing out hour number 1. Mike Chappell coming up at the top of the next hour. Peter Burns from the SEC Network and ESPN Radio. Bottom half of hour number 2. Bob Kravitz will lead things off in hour number 3. Trackside tonight at 7. Beyond the Bricks at 8. It is the month of May.
Yes. Get those flags for the radio audience.
Yep.
For a guy that didn't rank that in his
Green
top
flag.
3 events that he gets most excited
Green
about,
flag.
you were awfully excited there for
Green
the month
flag.
of May.
I said it was on the outside.
No, you didn't.
I did.
No,
I did.
No.
I did.
You want me to pull up the receipt?
Please.
All right, let me find it.
And if I did not say that, then I apologize to the city of Indianapolis, but I did not. And also, I would argue if I really wanted to go that route, Eddie Garrison, which I wouldn't do because I think you have a man of honor and integrity, that there might have been slight pandering going on there of the audience with your ranking system. But
No, it was number 3 on
exactly.
my
You
list.
see what happens when we,
Every time I come in here, I have to mediate
Pandering.
something.
What do you mean?
But it was a top 3, and it just squeaked in at 3 for you. So for you to clap back at me like that, I would
No,
think it would
was
be
an
number
easy
1.
number 3
What
for
was
me.
his
It did
top
not
3
squeak.
events you've attended or top 3
events you get most excited about every year?
in Central Indiana or
No,
at all? In all sports?
In general, yeah.
Yeah, I'll plead the 5th on that one.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a big list. I love the 500.
Exactly. See, you have to pander. You have to examine all your options
I've been
here.
to so many. My first 500 was the freezing cold Little Owl by just a few tenths of a second, which was a good way to start.
Yeah.
Really, I mean, it was cold. It wasn't just cold. It was cold that day. And then didn't miss a race until the split, and then came back in, 02, I think was my first race back. Oh, no, it was when I was interning here, so that would have been in 2001, and then I've forgotten a lot of the ones in between there. That was college and after college. There's some pictures on the internet that probably don't need to be shared with people on it. It depends on what you want it to be. Like the pageantry, the before. I could almost make a case it's not a sporting event, too. Like if you said like what's one of the more at that stage of my life, what was I more looking forward to? The race, and I knew everything that was going on.
Well,
in the
it's
race.
branded as a spectacle for a reason.
Right.
To your point.
Yes. So I think that to each their own, a bunch of things. But I mean, Final Fours and Super Bowls and Masters and hockey playoffs. I mean, there's a lot of really cool sports things that are out there. But I guess some of those are broader than just one singular event.
If you are playing it through there, and if we're playing this game, I'd also like you to play the clip of after you gave yours, because I believe I did squeeze in a comment there of.
Oh, that doesn't
that would
count.
be in my honorable mention. It does. It does. It absolutely does.
Kentucky
It
Derby.
absolutely does, because
even
at that
just
point,
racing events
at that
compared
point,
to this one.
At that point, you are taking it out of context. I'm telling you that at some point during that conversation, I said,
24
yes,
hours
you're right. It
of
should
Le
be on the
Mans,
outside. That's my bad.
Monaco, Daytona,
Yeah, but
Kentucky
it was
Derby.
forgotten about in your mind, so it doesn't count in mine.
No, to be clear, I'm not correcting it. I
There's a
stand
lot
by
of
my top 3.
other options
I
out
stand.
there.
I stand
I mean,
by the top 3 that I
you go
made.
obscure things. I mean, Champions League final, the pole guys in Scotland that throw those things up in the air, the cheese race down the hill,
The Olympics.
Olympics. Thank you for that one.
Yeah.
World Series of Poker, cornhole national finals, knife throwing world championships, which I'm happy to broadcast on ESPN. Darts would be. I mean, there's so many options that are out there.
It's a tight end, by the way.
Oh, yeah, we're supposed to talk about that. You were going to tight end
It's a
also.
tight end.
I have 8 tabs up about tight end. I asked
tight
Jimmy
end.
before the break if you had to build a perfect football player right now to add to the Colts, because, again, I thought they did a fine job addressing needs. Now, they may not pan out, but you drafted 3 corners. You added some offensive line depth with some potential there. You took care of the quarterback position. Reggie Wayne's high on the receiver you got, who's shiftier and different than the wide receivers that you have, although I still think it wouldn't be bad to go and have another wide receiver. I don't necessarily know if that room's going to produce a 1 and a 2 by NFL standards, but we'll see. But your tight end also. I would have said tight end also.
I almost went receiver because I would still love to have, if you're building it in the lab or building it in 3D printer, as you mentioned, a Jamar Chase or a Tyreek Hill type of guy. But then I remembered about, from the Chiefs fandom, how much I love Travis Kelce, how reliable just otherworldly tight ends have been to quarterbacks.
And what they do to free up underneath space
Correct.
for a Tyreek Hill or a Debo Samuel with George Kittle.
I'm talking about a do-it-all tight end,
Yeah.
like Kittle, like Kelce, like Gronk. Right now, with the construction of the Colts roster as it is in that department, you have a lot of guys that do a lot of good things at tight end. Nobody that is otherworldly to this point.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I thought that the drafting of Will Mallory was, again, he ran the fastest 40 of any of the tight ends. You know, there's definitely, I mean, he's not a sure thing. Obviously, he was the 11th tight end drafted. But there were different runs on tight ends in this draft. There were the sort of the given ones that you expected to see go off the board, like Dalton Kincaid early, Michael Mayer slipping to the Raiders with the 35th overall pick. But with the Colts taking a tight end in the 5th round, and it was only 9 spots before Purdue's Payne Durham came off the board, I thought if you were going to go tight end in this class, it was going to be somebody who was reliable in all 3 areas of the tight end game. I think that this offense really missed Jack Doyle. I think what he was able to do in terms of blocking for you, in terms of gritty catches, good hands, assuredness, you've got Granson's kind of your tweener guy, like the guy you're hoping can kind of sort of be that H-back guy that gets open. Ogletree had a great camp last year. We'll see if he's anywhere near the same coming back from ACL. Watts and Moali Cox, athletic, big, tall guys that can go and get it. But if you really want this offensive line to get back to what it was able to do, if you're truly going to invest in now a multifaceted running game with a mobile quarterback and Jonathan Taylor, then having a tight end that you could also trust to put out there and keep the defense wondering, man, are they running here, or is this guy going to roll over into the flat and get me an 8-yard hard catch? I would have liked to have seen that.
Give me a Myles Garrett or a TJ Watt.
Okay, so you want just a
edge, just a dominant edge rusher that's good in the run game and defending the run, and then able to get after the quarterback.
Is Titus. He is a titan of edge rushing. It's a good question. It's a good hypothetical. I'm glad that Eddie had a differing opinion. We'll see if Chappie has a differing opinion on that one. Mike Chappell coming up at the top of the hour. We'll get his thoughts on that and the draft and more here on the Midday Show. It's the Fan Midday Show here on 93.5, 107.5 The Fan from the DriveHubler.com studios. I'm Will Haskett. He is Jimmy Cook. Somehow we found a way to fill an entire hour of the show already just talking about the NFL draft and the Indianapolis Colts. I'm telling you what, we're either good at our jobs or we got nothing else to talk about. Let's talk more draft, shall we? The dean of Colts reporting is with us. You know him from 459 everywhere. I mean, he's all over the place. He's Mike Chappell. Hey, Chappie, how are you?
How are you guys doing?
Fantastic. I'm going to pose a question to you I posed to Jimmy in the last segment. Now that we've got 12 draft picks, we kind of think we've filled some gaps for this roster moving forward. If you were to have your say, you could go into a lab right now and build one type of football player, one position to fill whatever that last need is that you think this roster needs, what would that be for the Colts?
Well, I mean, the crying need is a right guard, but if I could plop any player on this roster, be a pass rusher.
Eddie.
a a Freeney Mathis type of guy. They've got good depth at the position. A lot of bodies who've done things, but there's not one guy you can say, yeah, this guy can get us 14, 15 sacks. So that's primarily the number one, but a right guard, and I still would like to see another receiver. I'm not satisfied with the receiver group, even with the draft pick kid, but they fill a lot of needs. But again, they draft 3 corners, and it's crazy to think that 3 corners are going to make a strong impact. I think Juju Brents is probably going to start alongside Isaiah Rodgers and Kenny Moore, but they address the only way to say did they have a successful draft 3 or 4 days later is if you look at this is what they needed in our perception, and did they address those positions? Not necessarily the player. Who knows? I mean, no one knows if Richardson's going to be a legitimate franchise QB. No one knows. You won't know until 2 years probably. But for the most part, they addressed what a lot of us thought were needs with players. So at least they did that.
Chap, the other exercise that we had done was of this draft class, how many do you anticipate will make the 53-man roster this year?
Oh, gosh, out of 12, probably 7, I don't know, 8. And keep in mind, what is it, a 15, 16-player practice squad, so it's really almost like a 69-player roster, the way teams and even the Colts, they use that practice squad. There's limitations and all that, but they will use these guys. So a bunch, I think a lot of them will. They're high on these guys. Now, whether a couple of these guys they took with the idea that they need a year of seasoning, I don't know. But I think probably 7 or 8 of these guys will be on the 53-man roster.
Certainly, Mike, we don't know what some of these players could end up becoming, and this is now the time where we just have to wait, see what they look like in OTAs, get to training camp. I mean, there's a million questions that are going to be answered in terms of their performance. But when you look at the type of players that were taken, not just the quantity, but the quality of those traits that were going in, did you sense or feel any sort of a shift in terms of the business operations of roster management that we've seen from this team over the last 4 or 5 years based off of the type of players that they selected?
Well, not as far as that, athletic players. I mean, that's, go back and look at Shaq and people like that. They've always gone on traits. While we were talking to Ed Dodds, Ballard's right-hand man, and he said that, some guys are so big and so fast that it's hard to fail, that you think they're going to make it because of that. We'll see. I mean, this isn't a, it's not a decathlon what we're playing or whatever. It is football, and we'll see how it plays out when they get not necessarily in OTAs, but certainly training camp when they're out there really, going against each other. But it's well, we all wrote about it. It's just the RAS, the relative athletic, stat that all these guys were off the charts high. Most of these guys were, and a couple of them were incredibly so. So, it's one of those that at least these guys have the physical attributes to succeed. Now, whether that totally translates onto the football field, we'll see. Most of these guys had tremendous success individually and with the team in college. I'm interested in a couple of the undrafted guys. The kid from Cathedral, is it Emil Ikior? I'm sure I'm butchering his name, but he's a guard, and he needs a guard. So we'll see. I guess it's a little bit of concern why he wasn't drafted. And if they thought that highly of him, they would use one of their late picks on him. But, yeah, by and large, the only thing that was a little different is that they took the Downs kid who's like, I don't know, what is he, 5'4"? I mean, I'm exaggerating, but he's a small, quick guy. And generally they've gone after bigger guys. This body type is probably Shane Steichen, who's told reporters, I know he did at the owners' meetings for some of those guys, that he liked a variety of players at the position. They sort of got that with Isaiah McKenzie, and this kid's a little smaller, but he's supposedly really quick out of breaks and yards after the catch. So they want, they had the big guys with Pittman, Pierce, and Strawn, and now they want to try to mix it in. So that may be something that they might not have done in the past. Other than that, no, it was kind of by their book, and except for a couple of positions, it's worked. I mean, they've certainly not been successful at quarterback in free agency, and they've really not done well at left tackle and pass rush. But there are a lot of other really, really good draft picks, and a lot of them have those athletic traits that they really prefer.
The Dean, Mike Chappell of Fox 59 and CBS 4, taking some time with us here on the Fan Midday. So, Chap, I'm with you. I had said that if I could, plop any type of player in there, it'd be another elite level pass catcher. I stressed kind of more towards the tight end because I feel like a do-it-all tight end, albeit hard to find, hard to develop, can benefit any quarterback tandem when you look around, what works in the league right now. But I'm with you there that the receiver room, I would like to see more improvement there also. When you look at how they went about attacking this draft, and obviously getting Josh Downs in the third, taking Will Mallory in the fifth, would you have liked them to attack pass catchers more based on what they got out of this class? Or do you feel like that the needs that were taken consistently on the defensive side of the ball and the times they addressed the O-line were necessary?
Necessary. I probably would have preferred another offensive lineman sooner, because I think they've got to have two or three guys, new guys, contribute. Before the draft, I thought they needed like three guys who weren't here yet. So the Freeland kid will be one. He'll probably be the swing tackle, but boy, it's still such a thin group. And I kind of think they've got nothing based on other than how they've done it. I sort of think they've got a veteran free agent that they like that they're going to sign, because I just don't like this group. It's just too thin, and I'd hate for Chris Ballard to be talking in January. Well, I just kicked myself because the one area we didn't address was. And offensive line has cried out since the end of the season, even during the season, that it needed to be upgraded. So, but it's funny. Stephen Holder asked Ballard something on Thursday, I think it was, maybe it was Friday, about sort of what's your plan on the offensive line. He said, "Well, I'm not going to share that with you." That's not normally how he answers things. It was just a different answer. I don't know. But I still think they've got something free agency-wise that they might do, that they should do. And, I keep going back to when the late additions of a Mark Lewinsky or a Chris Reed that were greatly beneficial to this team, those kind of guys. So I still would like to see the offensive line addressed in free agency.
Another thing in the offseason, Mike, that we're going to have to look at with this team is obviously going to be the development of Anthony Richardson. That's going to be the number one story in this market for this year, next year, 3 years from now. We're still going to be watching a young man develop into that role. Depending on where that development is when this team is getting close to breaking camp, where does he need to be? And let's say in relation to a Gardner Minshew for him to get the start, because that's going to be the interesting debate, right? We had that debate actually in the first hour of, if he's clearly the better player, then he starts. But where's the line of getting him game reps versus trying to go out there and have a quarterback at that position that's not going to hurt your football team?
Well, I would say to have a quarterback where the football team is not going to hurt the quarterback. You better make sure your pass protection is 10 times better than it was last year. And I totally agree that with his mobility, he can escape some things. But go back through the years, and a lot of times the most sacked quarterbacks are mobile quarterbacks because they run into pressure. 1 year, Randall Cunningham was sacked a zillion times. So that's really going to be interesting because I think it's not wrong to project that coming out of camp, Gardner Minshew will probably be more ready to start than the rookie. He's been in the system 2 years. He's played. He's seen just about everything. But if they believe that Richardson can play well, protect himself, but run the offense, they talked 2 or 3 times about simplifying the offense. At least Jim Irsay did. I don't know if Steichen did or not. Simplify the offense and find things he can do, and then grow the offense as he plays. Now, if they just think he doesn't have a grasp of the offense or they have any questions about protection or whatever, then you wait. But again, we all were in the press room. We were trying to parcel out the quotes, and you got Chris Ballard trying to say, tap the brakes a little bit, folks. And he's, you can't be Superman on day one. There's very few of those. But then he did say you got to play. Steichen and Irsay were more, you get better by reps, playing reps, and and Irsay said, practice reps and preseason reps are fine, and pay attention in the meeting room, but you got to play. Peyton played every snap as a rookie. Might have played every snap for the first 2 years, maybe 3 years. I've got it stored away somewhere, but now he was a little different. He just was. He came into an offense that was pretty darn good. Offensive line was pretty darn good. But they decided back then that the best way for him to get better quicker was to play. People need to remember that what they were 3-13 his rookie year. He still holds a record for interceptions by a rookie, but he lost more games as a rookie than he did in college and high school combined. So, and he knew that's what it was going to be. Luck was a little different. He takes him to the playoffs and really with his brilliance in the fourth quarter. But if they believe that this kid is as ready as possible and he's not going to hurt himself by how he plays, and again, like I said, and the offense isn't going to hurt him, I'm not going to rule out him playing right away. I kind of thought they wouldn't. All the talk you had heard leading up to the draft is that Stroud and Young were more NFL ready, and that this kid with 13 starts and 390-some passes isn't. But simplify the offense and with the off season and OTAs and then camp, I'm not going to bet against the kid starting in September.
Chap, you mentioned with Peyton, how successful that offensive line was, ready to go when he stepped onto the field. No more than 2 years ago, we were looking at the Colts offensive line and saying similar sentiment in terms of how talented it was, how reliable it was, and obviously things, totally went south last year. What is it going to take based on how it's constructed right now to them to get even half as close to form as where they were in the 2021 campaign?
Well, the 3 veterans have to lift their games quite a bit. Quentin, I thought Quentin and Braden kind of got their act together later in the season. Kelly struggled most of the season. And clearly the team anticipates a new voice and a new approach in the room with Tony Sperano Jr. that is going to make a difference. And Bernhard Raimann has got to be up to being up to the task, I guess. He can't be a liability, and I feel better going into this off season with him than I did with Fisher, and certainly prior. I mean, I thought Raimann showed some signs second half of the season of playing pretty well. The problem is, though, at left tackle, when you make a mistake, it's going to be a mistake that costs you generally. It's just going to be something where the quarterback's going to get blown up or sacked or whatever. But they have to have those four guys, the three veterans coming back and Ryman, play at a high level, and then you'll find a right guard. I never want to, discount guards, but I just remember with Howard Mudd through the years in the 2000s, he always had strong tackles with Glenn and Adam Meadows and then Ryan Dean, just Saturday in the middle, and he just found guards. Ryan Lilja and Jake Scott and on and on and on. He found guards. They ended up being good guards, but they have to be hoping or faith, whatever the word is, that those three guys will have strong bounce back seasons. If those three guys don't play tons better, I don't see how this line is any better at all. I mean, I guess it can't get much worse. We talked to Ryan Kelly, and he said you go through the tape, and there was a lot of good things. Well, there were 60 sacks, and the running game was hit and miss. There were a few games where they ran the ball pretty well, but it's still a bottom line business. And 60 sacks, it's second in the league, but it was the second most ever by this franchise. When you reach those areas, you got problems. And to this point, the only thing they've done to address it is to draft Freeland, in the mid rounds, and I just think it's risky.
Mike Chappell joining us, Fox 59, CBS 4. The NFL is a 12-month business. They find ways to keep our attention from one month to the next, even when there's not actually games going on. The schedule release, I think, Mike, is coming up next week, so we'll party with that one, which is always, to me, the silliest part of the hype of the offseason. We already know everybody that the Colts are going to be playing. We just don't know when that will actually be. But I did bring this question up to Jimmy, is if this schedule is hard early or there's more road games than home games sort of early, should that have any impact on how you bring in your quarterback if it is indeed sort of a 50-50 coin flip between whether he's ready versus Gardner Minshew?
No, I think it's going to be on. If they believe he's ready, he'll play. I guess I'd have to see what a really, really hard schedule would be. I keep thinking that the league's going to go with the Colts of Carolina. Then you got, Young versus Richardson, perhaps. But no, I don't think so. I think this will be all predicated on how the team believes Anthony Richardson is ready to play, and how the offense is ready to play with him at quarterback. Because I really think they're going to know what they have with Minshew. And that's probably a good thing. That he's not going to win. If he starts all 17 games, you're not going to go 14-3 with him. But I think he can keep you competitive. But the future is the young kid, and the young kid's got to play. And if they think he's ready to play, I think he plays.
Chap, what are you most looking forward to or most focused on for rookie mini camp later in the week?
Oh, not much, really. I mean, they don't do a lot as far as structured things. It's more positional. Just to see him play, just see about to run around. It'll be our first chance to see, him on the field in person. Richardson and the other guys, Juju Brents and all these guys. So we'll get a chance to talk to a handful of them, so you get to meet them and find out kind of how they carry themselves. But you don't really take too much away, other than this is your chance to really see Richardson in the uniform and or at least a jersey, and practicing where the big boys practice.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see them all run around. They're going to be fast. They're going to be able to jump really high, and their shuttle times are going to be fantastic. That's what we know about them right now. Whether they actually make the roster and have a big impact is still to be determined. Mike, thanks so much for the time and the insight. We always appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chap.
That's the great Mike Chappell. Catch his work over on Fox 59 and CBS 4. I'm so glad in the month of May, going back to our funny conversation about marquee moments and events and whether they're top three, but I mean, I'm just so thankful that racing becomes a part of our sports culture in the month of May, because I mean, you could just hear it from Chappie. It's like, we don't know. Like, if he's ready to play, he's going to play. We'll see if these guys do it. I did find it interesting that when you asked how many guys are going to make the roster out of this draft class, I mean, he blew through my 9.5 over under and went way on the under, which I think has to do with the fact that you just got a lot of bodies.
Yeah.
And how excited are you, unless one or two guys sort of surprise from the late rounds. This was Chris Ballard's had success with 6th and 7th round picks making the roster or making the NFL and having, long careers based off of where it was. But you start to have diminishing returns on that because as you actually build a decent functional roster with some depth on it, and those guys just can't punch their way through. There were a lot of holes to punch their way through 4, 5, 6 years ago with the lack of institutional talent that was there. But look, we can sit here and talk about it. We're supposed to talk about it. We're 24/7 sports talk here on the Fan. But this is it. We now know who they have, and it's going to be a couple of months before we actually know what they are on the field.
The only problem I had with any of that conversation, and I hope you're in here for it because we're going to have a great time, you were severely underselling not just the content, but just the excitement and enthusiasm that I'm going to bring to the table, and I know Eddie Garrison will as well, for schedule release day.
Are you wearing jerseys next week for this?
No, I don't think I'll bring out the jerseys, but,
We'll have the pom-poms.
I'll definitely be ready to go. I love schedule release day for two reasons. One, I love to know where the schedule is going to map out, and two, it is the time and the first time in this whole process, you mentioned it is a 12-month calendar event where we get to make wildly insane predictions on how the season is going to unfold and then revisit them week one and see if we want to modify them or change them at all. It's a great tradition.
Start placing our wagers on season totals.
Oh,
this is
season totals.
This is so strange.
Come on, Will.
This is so strange to me because
over under 5.5 wins.
I love
Not
drafts.
Colts, but,
I love drafts. I love the hip. I just love the overhype of them. I love the craziness of them. I love the drinking games associated with how many times you hear the phrase limited or unlimited upside potential.
Hearing
like
Roger Goodell get booed.
Like all of these things. Like I absolutely love that part of an off season. I have never understood, especially in the NFL, the hype for a schedule. Like we know who the Colts are playing. Like here, you want to know? Home games against Houston, Jacksonville, Tennessee, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, New Orleans, Tampa Bay, Vegas, and Los Angeles. Away against the Falcons, Ravens, Carolina, Houston, Jacksonville, Tennessee, Cincinnati, and New England. But
what week are they playing?
When are they playing?
What time? Who's
cares?
In prime time?
The one thing we care about, maybe prime time because we were getting snubbed from prime time.
How many Thursday night games do we have to deal with?
Does anyone win Jim Irsay's $1 Million Challenge?
What temperature is it going to be when they go play?
But guys, I can make the props right now. Like, if you want to know, let's have it out. Like, if Anthony Richardson starts the entire season against that list, you're gonna have more home games than away games next year. So that helps him maybe a little bit because you've got 9 games at the can as opposed to 8 games on the road.
What about that tough 3-game stretch though in November? I mean, you gotta know where that's going to unfold.
I did ask the question, so yes, I do wonder how the schedule will impact.
How
whether
will
or
the
not.
bye week impact things?
But Chappie then said it doesn't make any difference. So if it doesn't make any difference, then there's nothing. I will not be paying attention to the schedule release next week. I won't be.
Man.
I will be so deep into college softball postseason tournaments it won't even be a blip on my radar.
As I scream into the ether. As I do this with the little power that I have.
I used ether on the first
how
hour.
Our revolving door.
See this osmosis that's going on in this room?
With this revolving door.
He's going to use that word in the third hour.
I'll break it out for certain. But as this revolving door of hosts continues, whenever schedule release day occurs, please bring Will Haskett in here.
I think this is my last day.
This is heartbreaking.
I think this is my last day. I'm out the next couple of weeks. You guys will have something figured out by the time I'm available to come back in here. So no, this is it. I'm done.
Minimum,
I will not be here for schedule release day.
At minimum, then we're having you call in on schedule release day. At minimum.
I think I'm on the air. So it's next. I said the 11th, right? So that would be next Thursday. Yeah, I'll be in between softball games. I'll call in. How about that? All right, put it on the schedule.
Or you can just call in during the softball.
Sometime in the 2 o'clock hour. I'll be day 2 of the Horizon League softball tournament. So I will be in between games 1 and 2 in the 2 o'clock hour.
Sabrina Jones at the plate. Oh yeah, I think the Colts will win here at Oakland, and she hits a home run, deep left.
I'm not a season ticket holder, so it doesn't have. I guess if you're a season ticket holder, you want to know just logistically.
Well, same thing.
If you got your kids' sports schedules,
even if
it's
you're
like
not
how many
to
games. I get the logistics of it, but to the actual product on the field and what the season is going to be like for the Colts, it really shouldn't matter. But the NFL has to own the month of May in some way, shape, or form, and this is all they've got. Like, we don't have training camps, kind of not have OTAs yet. Like, this is the only thing they have.
And I'm thrilled about it.
What do they have in March?
Combine.
Good call. Yeah, they got the combine. You got guys running around in underwear. Big sell. I like the combine too.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's a win.
Pro days. Everybody looks good at a pro day.
Tracking the private jets, who's going where, who's meeting with what.
Free agency talk.
Yeah, I'm in on that. Okay, yeah, you're right on that one. Okay, are we done talking about the Colts? No, we're not. We're going to talk about the top pick, Anthony Richardson. What is he going to be? What can we learn about him in college? One of the guy that maybe watched more of them than most, Peter Burns from the SEC Network and ESPN Radio. He's going to join us coming up here on the Fan Midday Show. That's Jimmy Cook. I'm Will Haskett. Eddie Garrison here as well. It's 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. The Fan. Fan Midday Show here on a gloomy, craptacular day outside again in Indianapolis. With Jimmy Cook, I'm Will Haskett. Eddie Garrison over there making it sound Good as always. We're still talking about Anthony Richardson, what he's going to be. We're going to talk about it until we actually see him in pads. And that's going to be a while. So until then, we continue the hype machine on the 4th overall pick and that, and help us with that. A man that is the king of hype. He is the anchor at ESPN SEC Network. You hear him here on ESPN Radio. And he's the better looking of the duo that is on the air right now of ESPN feature group commentators coming up at the PGA Championship. He is one Peter Burns. Hi, Peter.
I kind of wish it was craptacular weather here in Charlotte because it's like 68 degrees perfect. So I felt like really bad not doing some kind of yard work right now. So like I'd actually trade you a little bit of the craptacular weather just to the fact that I would actually just be able to sit inside and do nothing for the rest of the day.
Yeah, it's not as bad as yesterday, but it's still not. It's still not go out and play weather. You going over to Quail this week, by the way? PGA Tour in town.
I'm torn because, like, you know, I don't know about you guys, but as like a huge golfer, I love playing golf, but it's such a tease to watch golf. And the weather, I mean, the course is going to be great. This is, of course, one of those great, kind of elevated, groups as far as, the amount of great players that are in the field this week. But, I'll probably make it out there one day, but then it'll just upset me that I'm like, these guys hit it 335 yards, and I can't even get it past 255. So, yeah.
Just turn on the radio. I'll have you covered on Sirius XM PGA Tour Radio. We'll have the live play-by-play, 12 to 6, Thursday and Friday. There's the plug. All right, back to what I'm actually here to do today, and that's talk football. Anthony Richardson, the real deal here in Indianapolis, or at least that's what the Colts brass is saying. You got to see so much of him in his really short tenure running the offense. Just give me big picture thoughts when you saw him come off the board 4th to the Colts here in Indy.
I mean, right off the bat, I'm happy for him because, covering Anthony and covering football in Gainesville for the Florida Gators for a while, he's a great kid. And I say kid because I don't even know if he's 21, right? He's so young right now. And I look at it and it's like, I've watched a lot of them, but I haven't seen that much, and nobody really has, right? I mean, it's 13 games. It's not a huge sample size. I will tell you this. If I'm a Colts fan right now and you want to believe in Anthony Richardson, go put on the first Florida versus Utah game, and you're sitting there going, we found the next game-breaking quarterback. We found our next Patrick Mahomes, the guy that everybody's going to be excited about. That's the ceiling. Now, unfortunately, the floor is, 4 or 5 other games where he struggled. Right? Like he had some issues with his accuracy. He had some issues, even kind of the confidence building in himself. But what I loved about Anthony, Will, and I think Colts fan will love about this, is the fact that he's aware fully that he's a work in progress. Right? This is not a cat that's going to come in here and go, yeah, I'm ready to take over. I'm going to win, MVPs and this. He understands he's got a long ways to go. And I think that was maybe one of the traits that people didn't talk about enough when he got drafted over at 4.
Peter, this one's a deeper hypothetical, but one of the debates we had last week on Friday after they take Anthony Richardson over Will Levis was Levis's free fall, and if Richardson was taken, or Levis was taken instead of Richardson, would it have been a similar free fall? When you were seeing all that play out for two SEC quarterbacks, do you think it would have been any different had the Colts gone the other way?
I definitely do, because I thought Will Levis was exactly where he landed, a late first round, early second round guy, because, he struggled a little bit last year, and the things that on tape, I just don't know how big his ceiling is, right? So, I'm a firm believer had Levis gone 4, that would have been a huge, huge jump, because you're not really looking at the potential 5 years down the road, right? You're like, hey, can he come help us right here, right now? And I think you do that as a early second round, late first round guy. Somebody was going to take a risk on Anthony Richardson because no one has seen the skill set like this, and no one's seen that small amount of film that when it pops, man, it pops. I mean, I used to play the NCAA football game for Xbox and PlayStation back in the day, and you could build a football player. Like, if you were building the football player for 2023, on in the NFL, you're building Anthony Richardson as quarterback. So somebody was willing to take that jump, and it takes a strong owner like Jim Irsay to say, listen, we're rolling that way. Now, the question is how does he get reps? That's my biggest concern. Because, it's almost like in a perfect world, guys, if you had minor league baseball and minor league football, you would throw him out to AA ball and say, hey, go work in your game. When you're ready, we'll bring you up. But it just doesn't work that way, especially when they're 4th pick of the NFL draft.
Yeah, no doubt about that. By the way, to show that video games aren't real, I made Indiana a dynastic, multiple national championship winning program on NCAA football back in the day.
Prairie View, A&M.
Oh yeah,
just be like I'd redshirt Heisman by year 8. Like I am so fired up for that game to be back.
Simulate seasons, and just so you can do the recruiting. That's what I would do. I just simulate the games. I didn't actually play the actual games. I just wanted to go out and recruit. Peter Burns joining us from the SEC Network. Okay, let's play out this hypothetical in a different direction. Anthony Richardson doesn't declare for this draft. He stays one more year at Florida. What would we be talking about with him? Because right now it's all on potential, right? If he's coming back to Gainesville for a team that it wasn't a great season by Florida standards because of the up and downs of that, what would it have looked like? What kind of were the rumblings around the bad games, the bad game film, if he were to say come back for another year of seasoning in college?
This what's crazy about it, Will, and that's why he's such an interesting topic, no matter if you're here in Indianapolis or just NFL and college football in general. There was a lot of people in Gainesville that were happy that he moved on, that said, hey, man, we just need to go in a different direction. He wasn't a quarterback for us. And, I found that to be interesting. The last time I even heard anybody talk about that was a little bit with Jamarcus Russell. There were rumblings at LSU going, man, he's got a cannon, but maybe we could run a different offense without Jamarcus. And sure enough, he didn't work out the right way. Now, I think that had a lot more to do with Jamarcus than it did Anthony. As I think Anthony has kind of learned from those guys that have made mistakes before him. But, I think Florida wouldn't have been that much better, but that's not necessarily an Anthony Richardson deal. That would have been more of the talent surrounding him. I mean, the last kind of quote-unquote project, you talk Trey Lance, you talk Jordan Love, of guys that projected to be good, but we haven't seen it yet. You got to keep in mind Josh Allen was a pretty damn big prospect as well, right? Like coming out of Wyoming, similar completion percentage, bad numbers at Wisconsin. And you're like, all right, well, can we teach him things? I think it worked out pretty well for the Buffalo Bills.
Peter, when you look at Anthony Richardson and the things that he still needs to work on, Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard made it out that most of it's mechanic-based in terms of the accuracy. It can be fixed. When you look at his age, his build, everything about him that he needs to improve on, would you start him week 1?
Absolutely not. I don't know if I'd start him week 1 of 2025. I mean, of the next year. I mean, again, I think the thing that he needs, and even Ballard had talked about it, and even Irsay has talked about it, he needs reps, right? You need an opportunity. It's like a golfer. Like you need to go out there and play as many competitive rounds as possible. That's the issue. Like, do you get that competitiveness in practice? I don't know. You really only get the game experience by going up in the game. And I mean, Will, as a golfer, you'll appreciate this. Like, he's a guy that can shoot 65 from the members' tees, but he can also shoot 81. And now you're asking him to go play the tips at Bethpage Black every single week and shoot under par. Like, does he have the talent? Yes, but he doesn't have enough kind of reps, and that's what he's going to get. And that's why it's going to be fascinating to see how they manage his career.
Yeah, and sadly, the only place to get reps is on the actual field against NFL opponents. It's just going to be it's going to be a fascinating conversation leading up to it. Peter, I'm sure you also expected us to just fire and pepper questions at you about 5th round draft pick Darius Rush from South Carolina as I'm looking at SEC picks of the Colts. But can you get me anything? I'm just looking at SEC guys the Colts took, and I'm trying to play to your wheelhouse right here. Do you think there's a steal here? This team needs corners.
Yeah, I mean, listen, this is a situation where Shane Beamer had loved Rush, and again, the problem was that he was not normally the number one cornerback, right? Like he wasn't going to be the lockdown. J.C. Horn, to a certain extent, was going to be that guy. So the question was, hey, was this guy a part where you can put him into some nickel and dime packages and he could be a special teams player and eventually bring him up? I mean, he wasn't a lockdown guy from the get-go, but then he wasn't asked to be as well. So, I mean, again, they've seen kind of the best of the best. And there's a reason why the SEC has done extremely well in the drafts, not because of SEC bias, not because of idiots like me talking about them on television. It's because when it comes down to it, GMs understand that they play a miniature version of the NFL each and every week in the SEC. And one of those guys like Rush is ready to do it.
ESPN's Peter Burns with us here on The Fan. Peter, I'm going out on a limb here. I know you and I don't know each other, but I'm trusting you here. Will you explain to our mutual friend Will Haskett why he's wrong to be dismissive of the content machine, nay animal, that is NFL schedule release day next week?
Stop.
I mean, so wait, Will, you're not a fan of it? Is
No,
this what I'm understanding?
I'm going to take 1 month off from the NFL.
Who's going to play on Black Friday?
I don't need.
Why do you hate fun? Why do you hate rumor and conjecture? Like, we're going to have to get you a new job if that's the case.
Hey,
like, this is our lifeblood. Like,
Peter, the SEC softball tournament's going on at the same time. It's better. The SEC softball tournament's better than the NFL draft release. Come on, I mean the NFL schedule release. Yeah.
Well, listen, I would joke around about it, but we do the same thing in the SEC. And I mean, there's two things right now. The NFL is king, and so we saw that for 3 months of people talking about just the damn draft, and there's going to be people talking about the schedule release. And again, I question when we did it at the SEC Network, like, really, are there going to have people like tuned in? And then you see the numbers that you can give any type of content. Absolutely, I'm all in for it.
Well, you got cooked. Well, this might be the last time I ever fill on this show. This is definitely the last time we ever have Peter on this program.
Peter, you're welcome back anytime.
If I'm part of it.
You got what you paid for. Now, the only problem with Will is that it'll come into the PGA Championship when he is just like absolutely lapping me with his coverage, and I'm the one behind the scenes that I'm like, please teach me how to do this. So this is the only time I can get over on Will because he's got me together 364 days of the year.
How many more Georgia Bulldogs will the Eagles have on their roster next year?
It's freaking pipeline. I mean, should the Philadelphia Eagles just sign an NIL deal with Georgia Athletics?
Yes.
And say we're going to all joking aside, you want to get really crazy with name, image, and likeness. Will we ever get to a point where the players will get part of the television revenue in college, and then we might have a situation to where, hey, guess what? The rights to Anthony Richardson are with the Colts, but the Colts want him to still play at Florida next year, and they're paying his salary to develop. That would be a crazy development in 2 or 3 years that we would never think was possible. But if you're thinking real outside the box, I'd love to see that development.
Can that happen in the current structure, or do we have to have a breakaway from the NCAA for that to happen?
Well, it's not necessarily an NCAA thing. It would more be an NFL thing as well. So it'd have to be a Players Association deal. But in the past, none of those discussions could ever happen because no one could pay an athlete to do such a thing. But if the NFLPA and the NFL got together with, whether it's the NCAA or anything new, the governing body of college football, could you ever look, maybe it's 5-10 years down the road, and say, college football is a farm system. Well, why don't we handle the farm system like we do Major League Baseball and just say you draft a guy, you send him down when he's ready to go, boom, he's up.
How close are we in that same regard to the full-out destruction of the NCAA?
The thing is I think it's a negotiation period. I mean, listen, it's teetering, guys, but I believe what saves the NCAA is how big of a contract they have with March Madness. Yeah. That if the March Madness basketball money went away, a lot of people would say, all right, should we just revisit and reimagine the NCAA? I know a lot of people in the NCAA offices, they're awesome. Nobody gets a worse rap than the NCAA 100%. About what they do in all their events, and I see it at Omaha every year. I mean, they work their butt off. The problem is that they were ill-prepared to handle a billion-dollar industry surrounded by amateur sports. You can't treat Valdosta State the same as you treat Georgia, and there's the issue where we're at right now.
Yeah, I mean, I hosted the National Collegiate Water Polo Selection Show last night after doing D3 men's tennis in the morning. You can't tell me that those athletes are being exploited, and there has to be a structure around to help them do it. That's a different conversation for a different time, probably over drinks, and we'll do that in a couple of weeks. Peter Burns from the SEC Network. Peter, thanks for joining us. I'll race you to Rochester in a couple of weeks.
Embrace the NFL schedule.
Yes.
Just embrace it, Will.
Never again. Never
Thank
again.
you, Peter.
That's the great Peter Burns. All right, well, we know where he stands.
I knew I could count on him. Put myself out there. He hit one out of the park.
And he leaves me with the NCAA dangled topic there, too.
That was a live grenade to throw in there.
That's
impressive.
A 3-hour show to have. And again, it's near and dear to us in this market. I mean, how many people that we know it's a huge employer of folks in here. And I agree with them. They take a 100% bad rap. There's 90 sponsored sports by the NCAA, 90. So they sponsor 90 different sports. That's across divisions. Obviously, it's not 90 specific sports. And 4 of them make money. I mean, think about that. Like, actually make money. And the rest of it, they are facilitating an experience for student athletes at schools around the country. And it's really hard. It's an interesting, difficult time that we live in, and it's a different conversation for probably a different program on a different time in a different place. But I was fascinated by some of his chatter there. I mean, even the people in Florida don't think that or know that Anthony Richardson is not ready for his NFL moment right now. But the problem is the only place that you can get better is in the NFL in his current NFL moment. It's at 20 years old, there still isn't a real structure in place at the NFL to have it like the NBA where you're almost exclusively drafting projects. And we've seen the league get younger, so guys are jumping in and they're getting more playing time early. But the Pacers didn't draft Benedict Mathurin last year with the expectation that he was going to be the Benedict Mathurin at his peak powers in the NBA. And I'm not saying that every NFL player has reached their ceiling, but they are significantly closer to it when they come into the league than their comparative players in the NBA when it comes to their competitive and physical peak. And Anthony Richardson is closer to that NBA type of prospect timeline than many of the NFL prospects and quarterback prospects are coming into this class. We had a lot of fun conversation about Hendon Hooker on this show, who is a redshirt season this year because of an ACL and was one of the oldest quarterback prospects in the entire draft. I mean, Richardson's, I think, 4 years younger than Hendon Hooker. And yet we're saying, well, he should get a redshirt year for experience. We need to see what he can do on the field. And Hooker's going to be 25 by the time he can throw a football in an actual NFL game. So I found that really interesting. It's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation with that quarterback. But, I mean, in the world of college football, Florida may have been looking in another direction even if he came back. How crazy is that?
It's insane. The only caveat I would say about the project comment is it can work in the NFL. It can, just not at that position group. Yeah. There's not a structure for it to be built. You can be taken as even if you're taken as a first-round wide receiver,
especially with bigger practice squads. Yeah,
correct. Like look at. I mean, again, I'm going to go bias here just because it's off the top of mind. But Kansas City was Sky Moore last year. Andy Reid's offenses are famously very tough for receivers to comprehend, particularly right out of the gate. It's not being asked of him because you have Juju Smith-Schuster, Marcus Valdes-Scantling, Mecole Hardman, and Travis Kelce. You're not having to worry about that. Yeah. You can develop a project wide receiver. With quarterback, and particularly when you're a team that doesn't have the quarterback of high-level caliber, Brett Favre when it was a Green Bay, Alex Smith when it was in Kansas City, when you don't have that waiting in the wings and your team isn't already built to a point where we're contending right now, the project window's gone unless you force-feed it and you make it so that the fan base is prepared, which Chris Ballard kind of did, that not going to be Superman from week one. We want to be cautious with this. There's not a project avenue built for that specific position, but there are for others within this league.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree with that. And it's weird. I mean, that's where I think the fan base, and I don't mean to speak for the entire Colts fan base here, I think we want to see Anthony Richardson on the field. I think if you just had to say, would you rather an unprepared Anthony Richardson take the field and we just take our lumps for a season? Like, sure, I think we're okay with that at this juncture. I don't know if you had fallen into, say you got in a really bad trade, say you gotten the reverse Richardson, running back Richardson trade that we saw how many years ago when he gave up a first-round pick. What was that, 2016?
For Trent Richardson. It was 2013 or 2014.
So you had the reverse Trent Richardson trade in Indy, and you were a good football team that ended up with a top draft pick because you got some idiot to take, your running back off your hands for a high draft pick. And you had drafted Anthony Richardson and put him into a position that you'd put him into this roster the way that it was assembled a couple of years ago when you had the offensive line gelling and everything like that. I think it'd be a different scenario. I think that we'd be like, you know what? If he's not ready to lead this team, let's not go lose some games with some rookie mistakes. But I think we're just at a different phase right now where it's you put him out there. But
because it doesn't matter. Like, it does not matter if you lose the games. It matters that he grows.
But we're going to have to, it's really, not game to game. It's going to be season-long body of work type stuff. Because just like it was in college, he could come out and wow in that first game, which we'll find out where that first game is going to be played next week when the NFL schedule is released on May the 11th. Can't wait to call in and talk about that opening game. But he could end up with, a 68% completion percentage and run for 85 yards and a score, and then the next week throw 4 picks on the road, whoever that opponent is. And we don't know if they're going to play on the road. It's week 2, but we will find out next week if they're on the road or not coming up. What I do know is we've got Bob Kravitz coming up at the top of the next hour. We got to get to a break. More to come here on the Fan Midday Show.
The Fan.
Fan Midday Show, that's Jimmy Cook. I'm Will Haskett. Bob Kravitz coming up at the top of the next hour. We'll continue this Colts conversation. Probably ask Bob his thoughts on schedule release day next week. Do you know today is the deadline for clubs to exercise fifth-year options on players selected in the first round of the 2020 NFL Draft. That doesn't apply to the Colts, who did not have a first-round selection that year. That was the Pittman-Taylor back-to-back second-round draft pick thing. I'm just looking at the NFL calendar here to try and get you even more excited, Jimmy, for things that could happen. May the 15th is the Rookie Football Development Program. Ooh. That begins for the NFL. Tentatively scheduled May 18th to the 21st, the NFLPA Rookie Premiere. And then you have the Spring League meeting May 22nd through the 24th. June, you got teams doing their own sort of thing in there. July 17th is the deadline for teams that designated any franchise players to sign multi-year contract extensions, 4 p.m. Eastern on July the 17th. This is just coming off of the operations.nfl.com site. I've gone into the nether regions of the back end of the NFL.com website here to try and find other dates to get you all hot and spicy over the next couple of months before we actually have games coming up, and then Hall of Fame weekend certainly kicks off the season August 3rd through the 6th.
By the way, we still have a pair of tickets to give away for the GMR Grand Prix here coming up in next week.
We have 4 minutes to do this. Can we do it right now, or do you want to wait until the last hour?
Wait till last hour.
Do I need to find a trivia question? Because that went swimmingly the last time we tried that one.
Yeah, I think you do.
Who was it? It was we had two Denny's or Danny's that lost, or
I can't remember.
Denny or Danny? Or
I don't know. All I remember is you made a guy do math, and then it was actually the wrong answer.
It was way off.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun. We give people some tickets. Yeah, we'll have some tickets for the Grand Prix coming up next hour as well.
Yeah, I mean, we had fun with it last time. We'll continue to have fun with it again. And in terms of you looking at the operations side of things for the NFL, again, I know there's some dates on there where, there might be more important aspects of the day-to-day operations for teams than others, but the schedule release is in a class of its
HR meeting.
own.
Like, can we get like a YouTube stream of Goodell sitting in front of folks during
You laugh, but you know
HR.
The numbers would be absolutely
Here's
insane.
The thing. Watching the draft last week, first of all, I understand it's a moneymaker. Having 3 different networks doing it at the same time makes 0 sense to me. If you had to assemble the best crew, I would have taken bodies from all 3 of the different telecasts and put them on the same stage. So if you're really into it, you're actually watering down your product by spreading out what you want in the information. I understand everything was viewed differently. The ABC product was significantly different than the ESPN product from an entertainment standpoint. I get all of that. But, man, we could do it. And, by the way, McAfee was crushing it. His online one was hysterical. He had Red Panda after the 15th pick, which was just gold. I mean, it was just absolute content gold. And I almost just say he should have it and just have Roger Goodell with the peanut jar or the peanut M&M jar next to him just announcing picks and just do a circus around him would be just as effective as some of the television shows that we had. But, I mean, man, it was and here's the other thing, too. I don't know how much money it would cost for you to pay me to be one of the fans on site at that draft. Holy cow, is that a lot of just downtime for nothing. And a cover band. That's it. You get a cover band?
I will say, that broke my heart a little bit, because You Gotta Fight for Your Right to Party has become the song about the Kansas City Chiefs, and the fact that we're not shelving out to go find the Beastie Boys.
6 hours.
Wild.
6 hours just to have another band play. I mean, it was
a tough look. Outside of that, I thought it was wonderful. Like, Union Station looked beautiful.
Yeah.
I love the pageantry of it all. Somebody said it's like a Coachella for NFL fans is basically what the draft is turned into.
And maybe I don't know enough of the on-site stuff. And Indianapolis should totally throw its hat in the ring to try and host it here. And you could probably figure out a cool indoor way of making it happen. In fact, you can maybe do it outdoors at White River Park and then kind of have stuff spill over, maybe even into Lucas Oil. I think you could actually have kind of a fun thing that's going on and have it be outside. Or
didn't you say we
Victory
could do it at
Field.
IMS?
Ooh.
It might not.
Would
I don't
that
remember
then
who
become the third most impressive event on your list if IMS had the draft while cars are going around? Ooh, what if we had cars racing? What if Pato Award delivers all of the envelopes?
Somebody posed this on the show, and I think he's thinking that it was you. It wasn't me, but I don't remember who it was.
Definitely not me.
I don't remember who it was. We'll have to go back in the archives to figure that out.
You think the NFL is big?
Might have been Scott.
Nothing will make IMS feel as big as it is as a big event, thinking that they could make it feel big at that track. Like, it is too big. Like, it's too big. You know, the concerts were cool, but then people showed up like, wow, I'm a long ways away from that stage. Like, this is a really big venue. It makes it hard. But yeah, I would love to see Indy get the draft. That'd be really cool. But just tone it down a lot. I mean, those poor people just sitting through hour after hour of.
What do you mean, poor people?
Band.
They chose.
I know. They chose poorly.
Yeah, indeed.
They chose poorly. Bob Kravitz next.
The Fan.
It is the Fan Midday Show entering our final hour. With Jimmy Cook, I'm Will Haskett. We've been wall-to-wall Colts up until this point, efforting Bob Kravitz. He had a speaking engagement today. He is helping to change lives in central Indiana. He's inspiring, and he may be inspiring a little bit long. So we will work on getting Senor Kravitz on the phone as quickly as possible, talking about all things Colts, what we've learned or gleaned or squeezed out of the nuggets that we've gotten from all of those in charge. Jim Irsay's speaking, and that was a recent article in The Athletic by Bob about, you know, just kind of his excitement and understanding this process and yielding, I think, to the strengths of his brain trust to make the right selection. It's definitely exciting times to compare and contrast off seasons to where I don't really know how falsely placed our optimism was in this program, and to have expectations managed, I think, more honestly and transparently has, I would like to think, helped to be a Colts fan in 2023 compared to past seasons.
The Colts managing those expectations in terms of he's not going to be Superman right away. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, or just the team's expectations. Like, to think that, hey man, we get Matt Ryan in here. Oh baby.
Yeah.
Watch out.
I mean, again, look, I was on the train of Matt Ryan was going to work. They still weren't doing anything. Like, I never projected them the way that a few did, which was, this is going to be a contender with the Chiefs, the Bills, everybody else, the Bengals. That was never the ceiling for me. But you're right. There was still, though, in that building, or at least being exuded of confidence, we are there. We are a patchwork away from fixing it. Whereas now it has turned into, it's time to take a swing on the young buck. It's time to figure out what he is able to do, but give us patience with him because he's a young quarterback. And that's the philosophy. You mentioned philosophical changes within the regime. That's the type of change you expected from the second you hired Shane Steichen. Regardless who the quarterback is going to be, people are going to continue to, and I'm not saying that Ballard might not one day become a scapegoat or maybe be rightfully let go depending on how this pans out. That could very well happen, but the entire timeline of things hits a reset when you bring a new coach in.
Yep.
Particularly when you draft a young quarterback too. So the expectations have to be managed to an extent. We've tried to warn Colts fans about that. We tried to do it last week for the draft. I will continue to bang that drum throughout the entire offseason. If your expectation is anything more than growth for this staff, your expectation is we can win the South next year, today, that's your thought. I'm not talking about once we see Anthony Richardson on the field. Today, if that's your thought, you're setting yourself up for disappointment.
The really interesting thing about this is the conference that the Colts exist in. If you look at the 16 starting quarterbacks projected in the AFC coming up this year.
It's an arms race.
It's unbelievable.
It's an arms race.
If I were to say right now, Jimmy, straight up trade Anthony Richardson for any quarterback in the AFC and then move forward with this franchise. And I'm not just talking about this year, not the win now, because I think even if you put Patrick Mahomes on this Colts roster, I'm not saying it's a Super Bowl team. You know, I mean, it changes the team. Like it certainly changes your expectations of what this team is. But there's a lot of guys you'd flop in and say, you know what, I'd ride the next 5 years over the unknown for sure. That number is significantly different in the NFC, which is what makes this Colts situation so much more fascinating, because instead of every year like one piece away, it's like, okay, you've gotten the piece that you now think could be that for you in 3-4 years with development, but you also have to take the temperature and look around the room, look around the sandbox that you're playing in and be like, man, there are a lot of big kids in this box, and it's going to be a while until I can throw them out and play nicely in peace.
And that's why, again, the type of move they made to take Anthony Richardson, the gamble, if that's what you want to call it, had to be taken because
there's not as much risk.
And with what Peter Burns mentioned to us earlier, and again, that podcast will be up, search the Fan Midday Show wherever you get your podcasts, the key portion of that conversation is that Will Levis might be ready right now. Maybe he'll start week 1 for the Colts if he's here, and that's fine. You need to map out where this franchise is going to go based on how far the most important position in the league can carry you in 5 years. And if the answer is Kirk Cousins, it's not getting it done.
Yeah.
It's just not, unless you, and even, and maybe it happens in Minnesota, but even last year where the Vikings for a long time were viewed as, they're going to be the team that represents the NFC. Yeah. Philadelphia was like top, but it's like, hey, maybe it could be Minnesota.
Right.
Didn't work out. I'm not saying it's all on Cousins, but you put Kirk Cousins in the AFC, you will be shockingly alarmed at how far down the list he is of best quarterbacks in the conference.
Okay, so the 2028 Indianapolis Colts. Let's go crazy.
I love it.
5 years from right now. The idea is you have a seasoned 25-year-old Anthony Richardson leading a team to the promised land, and you've built everything around him. So if we're truly projecting down the line, that's 5 years into Shane Steichen. He still has a year on his first contract. So again, we are banking. The owner is banking on a long-term plan, a long-term future in this game. So if I'm saying the 2028 Indianapolis Colts, it's Anthony Richardson and I gave you every single other quarterback in the AFC. How many of them would you I mean, that's the weird thing. How many of them would you still take in that scenario? So, okay, I'll give them to you. Ready? Josh Allen.
Yes.
Tua.
No.
Mac Jones.
No.
Aaron Rodgers. No.
No.
Lamar Jackson.
Is this a perfect world where we're ignoring what would have been given up to go get him?
No, you're just straight up swap.
No.
You're literally trading Anthony Richardson
I just want to make sure.
for these quarterbacks right now,
guy.
but you're not thinking about this year. You're thinking about 5 years.
I'm a big terms guy. No.
Yeah. Joe Burrow.
Yes.
Yeah. Deshaun Watson.
Yes.
Kenny Pickett. No.
No.
CJ Stroud.
No.
I say yes. Trevor Lawrence. Ooh,
yes.
Ooh.
Yes.
That's a good one.
Yes.
I like that one. You'd say no to anybody that's on Tennessee's roster right now.
Correct.
Whether it's Tannehill or Levis. Russell Wilson, no. Too old?
No.
Yeah, in 5 years. Patrick Mahomes in 5 years.
Yeah.
Take Patrick Mahomes. You swap him for that. Jimmy G, no. Justin Herbert.
No, but it's close because I really do like Justin Herbert, and every year, even though it drives me nuts, the Chiefs fan, the national media, and it will happen. You wait, maybe after the schedule gets released, if the NFL Network does what I think they'll do, which is bold predictions on win-losses, Chargers will win in the West next year. Happens every single year. At some point, they'll probably break through because Herbert's that type of, but yeah.
We're sleeping on the Broncos
no.
a bit too next year, by the way. Coaching matters.
It does.
All right. Well, that was interesting. I mean, I think you're right. It's really the big names. But this is a conference that's going to be defined by Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, and an aging Patrick Mahomes over the next several seasons. And so the only way you're really going to win in that scenario, I mean, you're talking about a pathway just to the conference championship game, not even the Super Bowl, is going to likely run through one of those three, especially with a couple of other guys that you would still take as the leader and the quarterback of your franchise right now. I think this does go back to this overlying comment that we've heard of there was no sure thing in this draft, even though Carolina gave up a king's ransom to go up to number 1. You and I still like C.J. Stroud as a prospect and as a passer, but if you were going to gamble on the unlimited upside of a prospect, you're going to gamble in this class in the hopes that if that gamble pays off, you have somebody that is on the same pedestal as effectively the three-headed monster that could continue to be bigger. Like, I mean, I think Deshaun Watson's going to have an amazing season this year. I think the Browns could be like, I am circling him. Don't listen if any of the guys in my fantasy football league are listening right now. I feel like I'm going to get great value on Deshaun Watson after there's the early run on quarterbacks. I
have some Browns fan in my league, so that's not going to happen.
Yeah. But I mean, there could be 4 or 5 guys that are still elite at that quarterback position in the AFC in 3 or 4 years' time. So the only way you're going to get through them when you need a guy to go get you plays in the postseason is to take a flyer if you're building out that far down the road right now.
Allen, Mahomes, and Burrow are basically all the same age. Mahomes is a year older, 27 and 26 respectively. For
a lot of tread on those tires, though. I mean, that's
they're both. Look, maybe this is bold of me, but whatever. There's 10 more years of that entire trio. It's another decade of what you're having to go through. And I don't mean a decade of they're there. It's a decade of high-level football across the board for that trio. So if we're mapping it out, and that's generous, I would say. What did you say, 2028? Is that
5 years from now.
5 years from now. So that's halfway through still the height of those three quarterbacks' powers.
Because they're all 26, 27?
Yeah. All in that range.
Early 30s.
Early to late 30s, depending on where you're at.
Almost all of them will have missed significant time, or one of them will have missed significant time in the next 5 years. Someone's going to get hurt. It's inevitable. It happens. Maybe not your boy, but he's been hurt a lot. I don't know. This is why you understand what needs to happen. Like, if you are just looking around at the talent that's surrounding you, it's like, yeah, you're right. Like, you can't even do the patchwork anymore. You can't even take, and this is why, like, I am fascinated. And I know I asked Mike Chappell about this last hour. I do believe that there has been a little bit of a shift. I understand that they have taken swings and dartboard throws at traits guys in the past, but that has typically been later on in the rounds, unless there was just an overglowing recommendation from somebody. But I feel like you now have seen a franchise that has said, you know what, if we truly are going to get that next Lombardi, we want to add it. We want another one. More trophies, please.
2 in 10 years.
Then you got to take a risk, and I get it. I just didn't think they were going to do it, and they did. And it's cool.
And that's why the optimism should be there. Again, I know we stressed this earlier in the show. I wrote about it on 1075thefan.com. Hope will not win you football games, but if Richardson is what he's projected out to be in that 5-year scenario we just rattled off, we'll look around the AFC. We'll say, there's Joe Burrow, there's Josh Allen, there's Trevor Lawrence, there's Patrick Mahomes, there's Anthony Richardson. He's going to be in that same conversation if he pans out to what he's going to be. If he's less than that, if he never gets the consistency there, it's not to say it's a complete failure. It's just the reason that when you look at the way Super Bowls are won in this league, and when you look at just the consistency of the last 10 to 15 years, yes, it's good coaching, yes, it's good front office work, but for the most part, it is a reoccurring cast on this high-level show that is the Super Bowl of the same returning actors. It is Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, now it's Patrick Mahomes. Like, it's that avenue that we're in right now. That's just of the last 10 years. Ben Roethlisberger gets thrown in there as well. You don't have that elite level figured out at that position unless you have the perfect defense. It's not happening. And when the Colts are in this weird catch-22 point, and there's going to be tough conversations with DeForest Buckner, with Jonathan Taylor, as we map out 5 years from now. Like, I don't believe in paying a running back high-level, top-of-market money. I love Jonathan Taylor. I think he's explosive, and this is still a deeper conversation, but like that we're going to worry about in a season from now, even though you get an extension this year, that is the cap work that's going to have to be done over the course of this rookie deal. And that's the other unfortunate part of why, if you're a Colts fan, you hope it's 3 years versus 5 years, because the luxury of having the quarterback this young is the rookie deal. Sometimes that's overblown, but it can be massively beneficial to you making your run if you're able to take advantage of the rookie contract.
Yeah, the reality is that if Anthony Richardson becomes what you hope he is,
the Brinks truck is out.
He's going to get paid, but I think he also arrives at that moment in his career, and it's not with the assembled characters that he has around him this coming season. Not even the good ones, for all the reasons that you just mentioned. Mike Chappell talked about it too. Like, it is an underwhelming. That's too strong of a word. I don't want to say the next one because it's too hot of a take. The wide receiver room is very, very good. They are good guys to root for. They have very good ball skills, but it isn't a group that is so dynamic that you scream out in fear as a defense like you do if Minnesota shows up with Justin Jefferson.
There's not a number one in that room.
Right.
There's not.
Anybody should. Now, maybe arm talent will help that group.
That's what I hope for. I hope that I'm wrong, because last year I was calling for it with Michael Pittman Jr. I need a leap. I need you to be a number one. I don't need you to be Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase.
Can you win with 3 number 2s?
If the quarterback's right.
Yes.
Kansas City proved that last year.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, Travis Kelce's basically a wide receiver 1 in what he can do for an offense, and the Colts don't really have a game record like that unless you want to group Jonathan Taylor in there with what he does with his feet. They don't have a game record like that in the pass catching department. But yes, it can be done. But the quarterback has to elevate everybody around you. That's not happening this year. It'll happen in 3 years, you hope.
And that's the thing, is that most of the players that are going to be a part of Anthony Richardson's ascent,
they aren't here yet.
They aren't here yet. And that's the reality. And you get the offensive line right this year with coaching, with getting a couple of extra bodies in there. Jonathan Taylor should have a better season, but you also, to your point, it's like he was Superman 2 years ago behind a great offensive line. The offensive line,
best running back in football.
Right, and banged up a little bit. Yes, you're absolutely was a little bit banged up, but he doesn't guys make holes for him. I mean, we've seen this. It goes back to my Trent Richardson comment. Like, you think that the guy's going to cure the ills in front of him. It doesn't work like that in this league. So you block first, you find someone to run through the hole second. It's going to be a different roster by the time Richardson becomes what you think he's going to become.
The quiet reason I'm happy Shane Steichen is here is because next offseason, potentially, I might be going out a year too early on this move. Next offseason, if the receiving room does not reach a ceiling where you're confident there's a number 1 out there, Shane Steichen is going to go to Chris Ballard and say, I need a number 1 wide receiver. Jalen Hurts needed it, and we went and got him A.J. Brown. Yeah. I know that was a weird set of circumstances, and it was a perfect storm for it, but that's half the battle in general manager front office work, is a little bit of luck and right place, right time. Whether to do it through the draft or whether it's a trade, Steichen's going to ask for that because they don't have it on the roster right now. How does Ballard address that over this course? Because that's the key missing piece, whether it's the tight end, like I said, whether it's a wide receiver, like you said. And I'm not trying to fully push the defense aside because I agree with Eddie. I love dominant edge rushers. Those are game-wrecking pieces. You need to be able to have it. That's not here either. But looking at Richardson's development, that is what's missing. That is what's not here right now, barring a significant leap from Michael Pittman Jr. or Alec Pierce this year.
I'm looking at potential free agent wide receivers next year. It is not promising. So
I'm hoping for trade, by the way.
Yeah, I understand. I understand it's going to have to come from a trade if you're looking for anybody in particular in that list. Yeah, it's fascinating. I was actually surprised. I remember when Brents was still on the board, and again, I said I loved it. I loved everything they talked about from the traits, guys that were draft analysts, everything that he could do. And even though the tape didn't match some of the things that he did, I just liked the local angle. I liked the local story. They went and got him, and in getting them, they also accumulated 2 more draft picks for him. Jimmy, the thing that really kind of surprised me at the end of the whole weekend, and I didn't talk about this earlier, I'm actually surprised they made 12 picks.
Me too.
That they kept accumulating, and knowing these sort of needs, I don't know. I'm not a GM, so I'm not going to tell you that this is what is even capable or available out there. There were a couple, if you just looked at the rating scale, they were pretty similar in terms of what you were getting in terms of value. I was surprised that none of the moves down just yielded a future pick.
Oh,
Because then
that's the way you're going. Okay.
Yes, because then you sort of back yourself into, I'm going to pick 12 bodies this year. I'm going to try and reshape this roster. But on a 53-man active roster, and even with the practice squad, there's just not a lot of space for them. And to kick those resources down the road, knowing that you're going to need them if you're thinking about moving up in future drafts, and you're moving an early second-round pick this year, could you have gotten a future third as opposed to a later fourth for next year or something like that, with teams who are then like, oh, I have to give up capital right now? I don't know what that negotiation looks like. I don't know if, I'm guessing that future picks are viewed significantly differently because there's variance in them. You don't know when they're going to fall.
Yeah.
So if you're a good team and you're thinking, oh, it might be a late third round pick, but then you have a Colts season like we had this past year, and all of a sudden all your draft picks have been inflated at the top of these rounds, giving away future picks is a bit of a crapshoot. So I can understand why you don't get it as much.
Unless you're Houston, then you don't care at all.
Right.
You just throw them away like they don't matter.
Why are they not giving up? Just give them Cleveland's first rounder next year. You give them your first rounder?
I know. I would assume that.
But what the heck is going on down there?
They are going to Texan. That is going to happen. I would assume that the Cardinals said, no thanks. We want yours or nothing. And they're like, all right. And maybe Will Anderson Jr. becomes Aaron Donald, like the side-by-side they showed on draft night. Who knows?
Massive satchel to carry around the Stones to pull off that trade to go back to number 3, but still, I mean, it's just, I thought they bought the satchel with a bad first, with a bad pick that you just gave up in the future.
I thought they were getting assets to trade up. I thought they were going to try to trade back into one of the middle rounds.
Yeah, like give up a 4th and 2/5 to go high third again or something like that, and get, a dynamic, I don't know what it would have been, like another dynamic corner, or maybe one of the tight ends. There was a run on tight ends again early in the 3rd round, so if you had them graded, although it was a deep class for them, it's interesting that you make the 12 picks, because we all know that draft picks don't necessarily pan out, but there's just no place for all 12 of these guys on the roster. So here we are.
I think those picks they were accumulating were them trying to trade back up to get Josh Downs, because you heard Chris Ballard say that they tried for like a good half hour trying to trade up with somebody to get Josh Downs, and then they ultimately couldn't find a reasonable asking price or a middle ground between them and another team, and they ended up getting Josh Downs anyway in the 3rd round. So I think that was a player that they had targeted, that they were trying to trade up for, but they just couldn't come up with the deal. That's if you trust Chris Ballard.
Could have been dancing. We don't know.
He dances a lot. He's very good. Very good. What kind of dancer would Chris Ballard be? It wouldn't be ballet. I mean, would he be tap? He's not fast enough. He's not skittish enough to be a tap dancer. Sorry, my daughter's in ballet, so I see a lot of dancing during the course of the week. Modern dance, what would be his best dance? Next time we have him on, let's ask him, like, if you were a dancer, what kind of dance would it be? Ballroom?
Yeah.
Ballroom, maybe. There's a lot of control in that. A lot of control. I got to know your steps. Yeah, he'd be like a ballroom dancer. We're dancing around this segment because the Q&A session at the Rotary Club has gone long for Bob Kravitz, apparently. So we'll get him at some other time, maybe tomorrow. It's fine. You know what? We'll talk to Krabby whenever he wants to.
He heard what you said about the schedule release, and now he's like, yeah.
He's going to support me.
He probably will.
He will fully support me on this one.
He probably will. Bob is not my ally on that.
No, there's no chance. You're not asking that question. I'm asking that question because it's, who cares?
Okay, but my follow-up to that is, will you have a piece on it, Bob?
No, he won't have a piece on it.
You don't think the Athletics we want all...
He won't have a piece on it. James Boyd might have a piece on it. Maybe Kiefer. But no, there's no way Bob's writing a piece about breaking down the 17 games this year now that we already know who they're playing, but we just know when they're playing.
Did the NFL put the Colts in a bad spot by giving them the Black Friday game? My column. Come on. There's something there.
Get me the heck out of here. We're going to talk NBA next. We have not one, but two pairs of tickets to give away to next weekend's GMR Grand Prix at the Speedway. If the weather's going to be as nice next weekend as it's going to be this weekend, you want that pair of tickets. But you know how it goes, folks. If I'm in this studio, you gotta earn it. 239-1070 is the telephone number. Call in. We're going to give trivia questions. They are not racing trivia this time. Instead, I am in a national, it might be international, I don't know, online trivia league that's run by a writer friend of mine in golf, and it's taken on a new world. I encourage you all to go to apocalypsetrivia.com if you want to join. I'm going to use yesterday's questions. We're in a new fortnight, and I will ask questions that were asked of me yesterday in the trivia league.
Man, I really thought
these are going to be hard.
I really thought you were going to ask what club you should use on the 4th at the Speedway.
The fourth hole. The fourth hole. So the first hole is the par 4. The second hole is the par 5. Third hole is the short little par 4. Oh, 4 is a par 3. Comes back towards the clubhouse. It's meaty. It's got water down. Water. I got me excited. I'm knocking the mic around. It's got water down the left-hand side. I'll never forget. I was playing in Anthony Calhoun's. I was helping plan the outing. I was doing outdoor logistics for him, and one of the celebrities didn't show up. He asked me to go out and play, and I played with Clyde Lee, the old news anchor at Channel 6, who now had run a successful marketing firm. And I got in his group. This is like 15 years ago. It was awesome. And I get out there dead cold into a stiff breeze. They had us playing the back tees because AC doesn't mess around. He wants his teams really playing good golf. And I flushed like a 4 hybrid to like 5 feet, just out of the chute, like not even warmed up. And I turned and looked at Clyde and the guys that he had out that day. We had a blast that day. That was back probably at my competitive peak of golf. It was good. I'll never forget that shot. We started on the 4th hole at the Brickyard. All right, you have the ability to bring people in here, right?
I do. Eddie, are you all set on your end? All righty. Let's go top to bottom. Let's go Justin to lead us off here.
Justin, how are you today, Justin?
I'm doing all right. You?
Okay, give me a sport that you feel like you have decent trivia knowledge in.
Basketball.
College or NBA?
NBA.
NBA basketball. Let's see if I can find a good NBA question that's in here. I don't have an NBA question so far.
I have one.
Fortnite. You want to do one?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Jimmy, go with it.
This is an easy one. I'm giving you a softball. In terms of if you pay attention to the news cycle. On Sunday in Game 7, Steph Curry set a record for most points in a Game 7. How many points did he have?
50.
Bang!
50
Bang.
burger.
Give it to him.
50 burger.
This is why we can have Jimmy giving out trivia questions. They're too easy.
Hey.
Not embarrassing the callers or anything.
Hey.
I mean, this is...
I feel bad for the rest of the callers because now that Will's up to the plate, he's going to ask them...
All right, listen, if anybody is in the Apocalypse Trivia League with me, I'm going to ask a question from today next. So in the interest of fairness, I've already lost my matchup today. It has been scored, but if anybody's driving around and is like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that Will's also in the Apocalypse Trivia League, then just tune off the radio for the next 5 minutes because I thought this is a good question.
All four of you.
This is a really good question. I got it wrong because my mind was not in the right place. So let's get the next guy on the line. Here we go.
All right, Cody.
Cody, you there? Hello, Cody.
Hey.
All right, ready? Listen carefully to the question, okay? This is a basketball-themed question, so I'm giving you a little bit of a hint. Name the school that was forced to pause 2024 season ticket sales in early April last month due to a massive increase in purchase requests following one of its team's losses. Name the school forced to pause next season's season ticket sales due to a massive increase in requests in early April after the team lost.
Iowa.
More specifically, please.
The Iowa Hawkeyes.
I'll give it to them. The women's basketball team, yes, because of Caitlin Clark. Congratulations. Congratulations. That's a very good. I actually got that wrong. I answered FAU. How about that? I answered FAU for that question. I got it wrong. I lost my matchup. And again, if anybody tells the organizers of apocalypsetrivia.com that I outed one of the questions and spoiler alerted on the air today, I gave a spoiler alert on the air.
You did.
I cannot be blamed
and
for that. I told everybody to leave. I've learned my lesson here. Hang on there to our 2 winners. That's 2 for 2 on trivia. That was good. That was a good question.
It was. In hindsight, the better question that I should have done was how many rebounds did Kevon Looney have in that game?
21?
Yes, he did. Andy, John, and Jordan, as well as any of the other listeners, we're going to be giving away GMR Grand Prix tickets, and that race is next weekend. We'll have a pair of tickets every day the rest of the week, so be sure to stay right here on the Fan Midday Show for that.
And for some reason, if you live here and you've never been to that race, and if you have kids, take your kid. It's an awesome family race. We're debating right now. I have a 12-year-old son. We're still kind of on the fence if we're going to take him to the actual 500 this year because it's kind of at the age that I started going. It's a long day. The 500 is a really, really long day. The Grand Prix, it's easier in, it's easier out. It's a shorter race. Everything is really good. Highly recommend if you haven't been out there with your family and you've got kids to take them out to the GMR Grand Prix. We have a special don't on the line. Jimmy, don't you do the honors?
Yes, I will.
Okay.
Gladly. The Athletics, Bob Kravitz with us. Bob, how are you, sir?
I'm good. Special guest. What, you guys running out of guests? What's
Yes.
the deal?
That's it. Well, it was worth the wait. We heard a big speaking engagement today. How'd it go?
Yeah, I spoke and I didn't drop any F-bombs, so I got to think it went well.
Good. Yeah, well, if you do that here, that's an FCC violation, and I'm mostly on Sirius
I don't want you
Radio,
guys to
and
run.
I'm surprised I haven't cussed yet either. So
Do we have a 7-second delay?
sure, we got the dummy button's always over there somewhere. I think I've heard it a couple of times in the last couple of weeks.
I did radio on that station for 2 years, and remarkably, I did not curse once.
Hey.
It's one of my greatest. It's something I feel very proud about.
Okay, so that is a great segue to a great question. At any point in time, did you mutter a curse word during 12 different selections by the Colts last week for any particular reason, either positively or negatively?
No, I mostly slept.
Okay.
Yeah, I find the draft incredibly boring, except for the first round, because these are a bunch of guys who I've never seen play. Juju Brents at Kansas State. Ask me how many Kansas State games I saw. 0. So, look, I like, based on what I've heard from people who cover this stuff and understand it, I think it was a really good draft based on other people's opinions, not mine. They got themselves a lot of really elite athletes, and it's really going to be up to the coaching staff, not only with Anthony Richardson, but with the whole group, to get them to, put on tape the kind of performance that they expect from them based on their physical traits.
Bob, how much does it change, if at all, the way that you'll judge the Colts through this Anthony Richardson era when given the fact that 2 of the other top prospects are also in division from this very draft?
I expect nothing. At least early on. And it's going to be an interesting, fun year because we're going to spend the whole year waiting for Anthony Richardson to get his opportunity. I do not believe he's going to start the opening game. I really don't. Jim Irsay mentioned that, but and I've always believed, and I've talked to Peyton Manning about this, that the way to learn is by doing. But I remember David Carr from the Houston Texans.
Mm-hmm.
He went out there and got his brains beat in as a rookie and never recovered. Never became the kind of quarterback they expected him to be. And so I think they've got to be really smart about how they approach this. Whether he starts opening the day, which I don't expect him to do, or maybe 6 games in or 12 games in, they've got to be smart because you don't want to ruin a kid like this. Look, being a rookie is not easy. Troy Aikman's Cowboys went 1-15 his rookie year. I remember covering a game in Cleveland when they came in. Peyton Manning was 3-13 with Marshall Faulk and Marvin Harrison. So it's going to take a while. This is a kid who's played 13 games. And I thought it was interesting talking to Ed Dodds of the Colts the other day that he had to kind of be talked into it a little bit. And he had to be, made comfortable by the fact that this guy's resume is so thin. But, man, he's got the tools. He's got the tools, and we'll see where that goes.
Bob Kravitz from The Athletic joining us. His most recent article from yesterday is answering that very question. When will Anthony Richardson see the field? And the Colts having differing sentiments when it comes to that. And as you kind of explored that question, Bob, we've been exploring it today, and so much of it is generated by really the transparent nature of the Colts more recently, and understanding, hey, we've got some room to go here. We've got some growth that still needs to happen, not just from the quarterback position. And so now managing the expectations internally, externally, however you want to view it, in the lens, looking through that lens at Anthony Richardson. If this was a win-now team, you wouldn't be starting Anthony Richardson, but this isn't a win-now team. So how much do we balance that in terms of our expectations of seeing him on the field?
Yeah, I'm not so sure there's a balancing act to do here. I think if he takes the field at any point this season, that would be a good thing. I don't think you sit there and judge him as a failure because he fails to start on opening day. I just think that Colts fans, this is not Peyton Manning. This is not Andrew Luck. This is a guy who played 13 games as a college quarterback. He's got a long, long way to go. Maybe he'll surprise us. Maybe he'll surprise me. But I would not suspect that he's going to be a guy who's going to be a difference maker, at least for another 2 or 3 years.
To that end, Bob, and I know this is going to be, you already alluded to it, the conversation point throughout the entirety of this year and throughout the entire 2023 season, but when you look at a player as raw as he is, with as few games started as him, as few snaps taken as him, how is that balancing act between knowing if it is just mechanical and the best trait for him, or the best cure for him, rather, is starting right away or starting by week 4, and how much of that is, okay, he's very young. If he's not learning the playbook, perhaps we do need to sit him for an extended period of time.
Yeah, I think he'll learn the playbook. I think he's a smart kid. I think he'll be just fine. But I think the mechanics take a while to come around. And I think his footwork, the little bit that I've seen of him, his footwork is a little dicey. The way he reads defenses, I think he understands them. I don't worry about that, but it takes a while. And, there's no sure thing here in terms of the way you handle this, because, you look at Mahomes, and he sat behind Smith for a couple of years. You look at Aaron Rodgers. I would not be terribly disappointed if we saw a lot of Gardner Minshew this next season. And I think Gardner Minshew, by the way, is a pretty damn good quarterback. Based on what he's done to the Colts over the years, you would think he's Joe Montana, but I think it's important that they get Anthony out there at some point, but I don't think there's any rush.
Tremendous lead in the most recent article, Bob. It involved Colts owner Jim Irsay. I'm going to do a fill in the blank here as it relates to the 2023 version of this team, and its owner being one of the outspoken sort of, I guess, information givers of this program. When Jim Irsay speaks, blank.
When Jim Irsay speaks, run for your life. No, you've got Chris Ballard saying don't crown him just yet, and you got Jim talking about getting him out there the first week. So, to me, this was a Shane Steichen decision. I think Ballard was on board. I think he was good with Richardson early on, but I think Shane Steichen looks at this kid and says, "This is what's his name? The quarterback for the Jalen Hurts. Sorry, it's Jalen Hurts on steroids. This guy's got all the talent in the world. It's just going to take a while. And again, I think the more patient we are, the better."
Bob, since you were, like you mentioned, not as into or intense about the draft as some of us were, this leads Will's prediction to likely be right, which is, does this mean I cannot expect a column from you reacting to the NFL schedule release next week?
Oh, I don't know.
Are you excited by the schedule release date every year?
Well, I always like to know where I'm going.
Yeah.
That's
Logistics.
always a good thing.
It's logistics.
That matters.
It's all about logistics. Yeah. Are we going? Are they going to New England? That's my question, because I always got to be careful in New England.
They are going to New England next year. That's the,
Why
we don't
in
know
the
what the date
hell
it is,
does
but
that
that's the
happen?
away game.
Well, I'll bring my I'll bring my defensive. I'll be good.
Just walk around with an air pump, and right down the middle. Just walk with an air pump in your hand the whole time. You can get it for like $3.99 at Dick's or something like that. You'll be fine.
I just did this speech, and everybody's asking me about the Deflategate, and I'm like, good
yes,
God.
yes.
It will never end.
How far in the
Okay.
Q&A did that question come?
Yeah, there you go.
What's that?
How far in the Q&A did that Deflategate question come? Or was it just before you spoke?
Number 3.
Yes.
Number 3. Yeah. What happened with Deflategate? Oh Lord. What I remember most about that whole thing, not to bore you, but I went on with Anderson Cooper and on
Yes.
CNN,
Yeah.
and I almost called him Cooper. I came this close.
He's the oldest Manning.
I caught myself at the last second.
Oh, so okay. I'm gonna totally derail this conversation then. So
Okay, please do.
What do you wish you were asked to speak about? Like if someone said, "Hey, Bob, we want you to come and speak to our group, but we would love to hear you talk about this," something you've never been asked to, but you'd be like, "Man, I would really love to give a talk about this."
Actually, I did. They asked me about the process. What you do at a game, how you decide what to write about. I enjoyed talking about the process of sports journalism, and because that's what I do, and I find it intriguing. Not everybody does, but yeah, that was kind of fun to talk about.
Yeah, I think that would be interesting. I mean, it's very easy to take somebody out of the public figure sector and just be like, "Hey, come and talk about yourself," and you'd be really surprised to find out
what you do.
Yeah, you'd be really surprised people would find out that we don't really want to talk about ourselves. Like we would like to talk about something that fascinates us and would fascinate the sort of audience. So I'll ask that: what are you most fascinated by, non-Anthony Richardson, about the Colts this coming season?
Well, the fact that they went after all these elite athletes, and you're like Jim Irsay was saying, we're not drafting a track team, and yet at some point that's kind of what they're doing. They've got a lot of guys who have not done it on tape, or they've got a few guys who've not done it on tape, but have all those measurables, and we don't know what they have to offer. Daniel Scott and these guys, they all look the part. They're going to look great coming off the bus, but can they play? And it's really going to be up to Shane Steichen and this new coaching staff to get them right, to get them playing the way they want to get them playing.
Bob, always a pleasure. Loved the most recent column. I'm sure there'll be something to talk about, and make sure you put 3,000 words in for the request for Jimmy's schedule release article next week. They would really like that.
I'll do that, man.
Thanks, Bob.
That's the great Bob Kravitz. And yeah, it's everybody has a different sort of view on it, and of whether Richardson's gonna play or not, and we're gonna beat that horse all the way until we get to actual training camp. But it's going to be the next sort of fascinating thing. Like we were wondering what the decision-making tree looked like to get to last week, and I think a lot of us were kind of floored by that. I don't know what the surprise would be when the season starts. I don't think we'd be surprised one way or the other who the quarterback is. Nick Foles being the quarterback would be the most surprising thing at the start of the season. Now that'd be interesting, but I don't think there's going to be necessarily a surprise. And I think we also are at a place where I don't know if anybody's going to be up in arms. Like if I think that he should wait and see NFL games from the sideline, get a ton of preseason run, and then maybe if Gardner Minshew's just not working out and you've seen some good stuff from practice, you trot him out there in week 8 or 9 and get him some late season reps when things are different, or you don't start him at all, whatever. Like if the opposite happened, like I don't care. Like no one will, I don't know if I really would care if the opposite happened. The one thing you don't want to see is him get broken or regress rapidly from a place where you feel like he was rushed into playing, which I think is what Bob was alluding to a little bit. The two things that could really go wrong is you really weren't ready for the moment, or the team wasn't ready around you to support you in the moment. So let's not mess this up when you're only 20, 21 years old.
I just keep going back to, and again, it didn't matter to me with drafting him because the upside is there, but the only way to fix anything, and I'm not saying maybe it doesn't damage him more, but the only way to fix anything in regards to inexperience is by reps. And I'm not saying it has to happen week one, but it's an interesting point of what the reaction is going to be from the fan base, because it's not like they're supposed to win the division next year. You look at all the examples that we've mentioned of teams that had quarterbacks already ready in the wings, and then there was a push or a calling to start the rookie, let the rookie go. There'll still be bubbles of that, but it's not like, well, had we started the rookie from the get-go, maybe we would be an AFC South winning team versus like, I go back to Alex Smith in Kansas City. Like, yes, there was a moment because there have been so many shortcomings for the Chiefs in the playoffs, and a lot of them could be directly pointed to the quarterback position where it's like, yeah, by week 8, I was like, all right, maybe let the rookie go. And that's going to be discipline for the Colts if that's the direction they ultimately go. But if it is all reps, and like Bob said, he has a grasp of the offense, he has a grasp of the playbook, you got to rely on him at some point to not get hurt. And he's built to not get hurt the way that he's, just off the charts, an athletic specimen to the umpteenth degree. I just don't see what is to be gained by sitting him unless it really is he needs to know what life in the NFL is like off the field. We just want him to sit, observe, and soak up Steichen and Minshew like a sponge.
We will table this conversation until probably August if we were truly responsible when we start to see him in practice and in games.
A responsibility. What's that, Will?
Hey, Eddie, how long's our next break?
I got about 3 minutes.
In 3 minutes and 5 seconds, we'll talk about if Anthony Richardson starts week 1 or not for the Colts.
Plus bets.
Indy's biggest
One of the greatest breaking news tweets of recent memory came across from Shams Charania a little bit ago. The Memphis Grizzlies have informed pending free agent Dylan Brooks that he will not be brought back under any circumstances, league sources say. I mean, that is just so beautifully written and informed. And
you can't even drop, so you're saying there's a chance. No, it's the door's slammed. It's locked.
So stinking good. Lakers-Warriors tonight, must watch. A series that's so must watch, it's going to start so late that I'm not going to watch pretty much any of it until we get to the weekend. That's how it rolls in the Haskett household. 10 o'clock. I mean, God, there's no way I'm watching that game. I'll be reading a book at 10:15. I'll be passed out by 10:45.
So send you text alerts throughout the game is what you're saying. You're going to have notifications
ever since I've been in here for the last couple of weeks.
Mode.
Oh, yeah, it'll be off.
Okay.
It'll be off.
Yep.
Heat Knicks, 7:30. We'll see how Jimmy Butler's ankle is. That's a big game, obviously, for New York. And Lakers-Warriors, I'm assuming it's going to set all sorts of ratings records over the next couple of weeks, the way that Warriors and Kings were. I mean, that is, I hope it goes 7. Neither one of those teams is going to win the title, I don't think, because holy cow, Denver looks good. And there's your NBA minutes here on the Midday Show. Let's make some money.
The Jay Cook Plays of the Day.
This is me, all right? I'm not a athlete. This is my way. This is how I win.
Today's Plays of the Day, another mix of the NBA playoffs plus the MLB. Going to take the Tampa Bay Rays to win on the money line over the Pittsburgh Pirates. Also going to take the Cleveland Guardians to win on the money line, that at plus 145 juice against the New York Yankees. For the NBA, over 25.5 points for Anthony Davis, as well as over 4.5 3-pointers for Steph Curry in Lakers-Warriors. But the Lakers win on the money line. Yes, it's high juice, but it's worth the investment in that regard. Those are your plays. 3-2 yesterday, 3-2 on the week.
FYI, when you say high juice, what is it?
High juice, it's minus 190. So
what about the Rays?
No, the Lakers.
They are a minus 165. I took the Warriors.
Oh, you took the Warriors. You said Lakers.
You did say Lakers.
I apologize. That's on me.
Warriors minus 190.
We don't have a fine bucket. So
I'm going to expect Jimmy Butler to play, so that's why I'm going to scoop the 6 with Miami. This series is just screaming close the entire time, and I'm taking the under 208.
All right. Will?
I'm actually going to look for real. Remember last time I was in here, I took that stupid Heat like minus 12 or plus 12, whatever it was. And I texted you guys later because every single legitimate other bet I played that night won, except for that one that I said on the air. So I was like, oh.
Didn't you go the other way too?
Well, no, I ended up parlaying that with the other 3 lines of the NBA games and got all of those right. And I also played them independently. Right. And if I just realized how stupid of a line that was, I'm actually going to take under 12.5 rebounds for Kevon Looney tonight. I thought it was a good matchup for him in the post against Sacramento, especially against Sabonis, who really couldn't match him from a length size. I think that the Lakers have the ability to neutralize that.
I like that
in terms of the game tonight. So I'll take the under 12.5 rebounds for Looney. I think that's inflated because of the performance against Sacramento. My Cubs bounced back last night, but that's because they had Smiley to kind of settle things down. I think they're throwing Wisniewski tonight. If that's the case, then I'm going to look at some positive Washington action tonight. I haven't figured out that action, but I'm definitely it's a terrible franchise they're playing, but after being swept in Miami, they're not playing terrible baseball. I still think we're swooning, so I'm going to look for some positive Washington action tonight against the Cubbies.
Also look out to carry off of Eddie's pick. It'll be close to game time, but if they play Jimmy Butler, look at his point total. I'm not going to give a bet there because I don't know what it's going to be, but if it was 28.5, I'd probably go over. I don't know what he's been setting at trend-wise, so I'm not.
He was
at
26.5 in game 1.
Okay, so if it's in the 26.5 to, we'll say 28.5 range, I would take the over.
Plus 100, so you can get double your money on over 9 runs Cubs-Nats tonight. I'm going to do that. That's what I'm going to do. I think it's going to be a scoring fest. Cubs could still win that. That way it keeps me least in rooting interest. Let's go for a shootout tonight in the nation's capital. All right. We learn anything today?
We learned that you have newfound love for the NFL schedule release, which is nice.
Never coming back here ever again. It's actually maybe partially true. I don't know when the next time I will see you, gentlemen, but thank you so much for piloting us through the day. And the last couple of weeks have been fun. We got ourselves a quarterback, and now we get to just talk about whether or not we're actually going to see him play next year or not.
So next week, we'll probably look at 2 paths, what your prediction is for the Colts win-loss record after the schedule's released with Gardner Minshew under center versus Anthony Richardson. I think it'll be a great conversation.
Call me on Thursday in between softball games. We'll have a good time. Okay. Thanks to all for listening. Thanks to Eddie. Thanks to Jimmy. I'm Will Haskett. Talk to you next time. John's next.